All right. What's happening? We're here. We're back. It's Sunday, and you know what happens on Sunday. We get down with some astrology on Sunday night. So I have a piece of gum in my mouth, and a lot of people don't appreciate that. And I understand why. So I'm going to get rid of that gum right now. But you don't get to see how I get rid of it. And there it went. No more gum. I was addicted to gum for a long time. If it wasn't filled with high fructose corn syrup, I'd probably chew it more often. And I don't know what the psychological meaning behind being addicted to gum is. I'm not sure. I know there's a meaning about chewing ice. They say when you chew ice that you're sexually frustrated. And I do remember chewing a shit ton of ice when I was a teenager. So I could probably attest to the fact that that is probably true. The chewing ice does mean chewing gum. I don't know. I like blowing bubbles though too. That's the other thing. And I prefer bubble gum than chewing gum. Chewing gum's kind of boring, although it suits a purpose. Behind me, you can see the silhouette of Chiron, because we're going to be talking about some Chiron tonight. And we're going to be talking about Sam Harris. Oh, look who's here. Get over here. Come on. You just can't get up on the computer. Come on. You got to come over here. See, you turned it off. The astrological cat is back. Look at that. Big shout out to Dr. Joan and his rehabilitation. Yeah, they've missed you. The world has missed you. I've missed you too. I've missed you too. Yeah, you have to reacquaint yourself with this space, don't you? Jasper, the astrological cat. Yeah, good boy. Good boy. We like it. Jasper, are you going through your Kitty Chiron return? We'd have to figure that out because they don't live a full cycle, so they don't get to go 50 years. I don't know how cat astrology would deal with a Chiron return, but we're going to get into Sam Harris tonight. And while he has already gone through his Chiron return, it's playing a pretty interesting role in his sun sign astrology. Isn't that right, Jasper? Yeah. Everybody's happy to see you. I'm happy to see you. Yeah. You want to say hi to everybody? You want to say hi? Look at him. He's like a fierce lion. Look at him. That's about as close to a lion as you get with a ginger tabby. That's right. And I'm always better. My shows are always better when you're here. Yes, they are. I'm always better when you're here. Yeah. You bring the astro cat energy, the catastrophe, or something like that. All right, Jasper, I'm going to let you hang out here in my lap, or as always, you're welcome on the couch. You can be my Ed McMahon. Yeah, I know. I know. The only thing you're not welcome to is stick your tail in my face. That's a little rude. But you get some latitude because you've been away for so long. It's like Jasper was off in a war. He was off in a war and he came back from the war now. Yes, I know. And you've undergone some PTSD treatment. And now you're back in the trenches. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And you know what? I didn't force you, did I? I wasn't like a show owner, you know? It's like, get the fuck back over here. Where have you been? Half my brand is built on you. And what do? You just leave? Did I ever do that to you? I never once did that to you, did I? I let you have your time. I did. I let you have your time and space. But Dr. Joan was a very helpful influence in your life to get you back out here. Yeah. So think of Jasper as being like Brian Wilson. And he had to take a break from the Beach Boys. And Dr. Joan played Eugene Lundy, the therapist who was he was a nut job. I mean, he was really a nut job, but he actually helped Brian Wilson. It's one of those weird things, right? It's like he was really good for Brian Wilson up to a point, and then it got weird. And it got really weird, right? Yeah. Yeah. All right. What are you gonna do? You're gonna sit over here? Why don't you sit over here? Why don't you sit over here? Did you play the piano sandbox for the last few months? Is that what happened to you since Rosie left? Huh? People thinking, what the fuck? I think this is an astrology show or something. He's just sitting there talking to his cat. And he's talking about the Beach Boys. What did I tune into? I promise we'll get there. There seems to be a fair amount of traffic in chat. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button and also hit the like button. If you like the show, share the show. We always have a good time here on Sunday nights. I think we've reached maximum capacity for the weekend with David. And man, I have been cooking up ideas this weekend. Day one, nailed and filled. Day one promises to be an extremely interesting and fun time. Day two, we are working out some of the details for day two. And we know David is going to go one to the room, right? I'll do some one to the room. But what I really want to do, and this is part of day one for the event, is my goal is to create an Aquarian experience, right? Where as many people who are there are involved in many different facets of what we're going to be doing that weekend. So day one, I got completely planned out. I'm working on day two, and I've got basically half a day two planned out already. And then I just have to fill in some blanks for day two. And then Sunday, we're going to have a great brunch on Sunday, and I'm working on our third event during the day. Well, it'll be an event it won't be our third event. We'll have a number of events, but it'll be our event during the daytime on Sunday. And then Sunday night, we're breaking out the karaoke on Sunday night for the end of yacht season. We're going to be pulling the yacht into the dock on Sunday night. So if you're going to be attending, bring your yachting finest, and also bring your karaoke voice. And I knew you were going to do that. And you were going to fucking do that. He's going to go sit on my suit. You like that. I knew you were going to, that's the one place I didn't want you to go. Cats will always do that. The one place you don't want them to go, that's where they go. I shouldn't have left that there, should I? That's my fault. Anyway, normally I'm not a big karaoke guy, but I think it's fitting. I think it's really fitting. And the very first get together we had, which was, oh God, this will be the fourth year. So it'll be 4 years ago, this October. It's amazing how fast it goes by. But the final night, it just all happened sort of spontaneously. We were all hanging out outside. It was Sunday night. It was probably about maybe 9 o'clock at night. And everybody started to sing. And we had some wonderful voices amongst our group. And this was all pretty much without any kind of karaoke thing, or I think we did have a little speaker, and I think we were finding some instrumental tracks, which are generally karaoke tracks, and people were singing along because they knew the words. or if they didn't, they held them up on the cell phone. It was all really super spontaneous. It was great. It was really great. That was like, wow, look at all these people and having talent that, you know, who knew this person had that talent? And that's where, you know, that's where it ended up. So we're going to consciously do that this year. And we'll bring the yacht into the dock that night. All right, let's get to you and see who you are. I'm going to do a little pitch for True Hem Science when it's all said and done here tonight. And actually, not even before it's all said and done, after I talk to you in chat. It's always good to see you here tonight. There she is, Dr. Feelgood, Joan Essenhouse, Lana Anderson. Lana's got herself a cute little kitten, little black kitty. Congratulations on that cute little black kitty, Lana. W.C. Ray, the worm will save the world. That, of course, is in reference to Dennis Rodman going over to Ukraine to go negotiate for the release of Brittany Griner. So he's doing some transatlantic diplomacy. How about that? What else do we have? There's Susie Gemini. La La HK. What's up? What's up? Back at you. There he is, the Count himself. Count Leon Vito Vincent Radway in the house. What's going on? There's my man Ryan checking in. What's going on, Ryan? Carrie Rose is here. And there's Lana. She is a proud mama. I didn't even see your tweet, and there you are, or your text. I got a new black kitten the day after Black Cat Appreciation Day. I thought that was Martin Luther King's birthday. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Wouldn't Black Cat Appreciation Day be Red Fox's birthday? All right, who else do we have? JJ, what's happening, JJ? Our correspondent from the Windy City, our cosmic correspondent from the Windy City. Kelly M is here. What's going on, Kelly? Good to see you. Let's see, who else do we have? Rhiannon checking in. Kelly B is here. I need this show tonight. I've been in a weird numb state today. Tomorrow will be hard. But I took the day 1 year. I took the day 1 year. So hard to believe my mother's been gone. Oh, that's hard. So tomorrow is the birthday or the anniversary, I'm sorry, of your mother's passing. That stuff never really goes away, does it? It does not go away. Like, you just always remember these days, or they're etched into the calendar of your mind. And that comes up 1 year. You know, I had a client one time, and he used to follow my show quite a bit, but I had a client one time who came to me through a third party. He was having a very, very difficult time with the loss of his wife. I hope he's well. I haven't talked to him in a while, but he and I talked fairly frequently for a while. So he hired me to help him astrologically with the loss of his wife. Of course, that meant looking at their charts, et cetera, et cetera. And before I did that, what I wanted to understand was if there was a so-called science of grieving. I wanted to see, are there any common denominators in the loss of somebody's life? What I found was kind of interesting. So Kelly, I'll share this to you and anybody else that is experiencing grieving or has. We all have, right? It's part of the trip here, part of the game. So one of the things that they found was that there wasn't any commonality. That for some people, the grief could last a lifetime. And for other people, that grief could be shorter, and that there are degrees and intensity around grief. So it was one of the most subjective things that, you know, you could look into and not necessarily find one common denominator with grief, except for two. There was one had nothing to do with like recovery time. Because I was actually looking, is there a kind of a standard moment? And believe it or not, there was the inkling of a standard moment, which I will share with you. But it wasn't like something where it was just clockwork. But there did seem to be some commonality about this one time frame. However, the one standard theme in everybody's loss was that there was no new normal. That was it. There was no new normal after that. Like once you had lost somebody close to you, you were never going back to who you were or what your life was before that happened. So that was the one commonality. However, and this was, again, one of those things that wasn't like it was completely consistent. They did find that a small percentage of people began to shift their relationship with grief after 18 months. So file that away for wherever you are in that spectrum. 18 months seemed to be, for a small percentage, the one thing that they could find that seemed to correlate to the condition of loss. So Kelly, my heart goes out to you and everybody else who's lost somebody. We had of course, we lost Rosie here. I guess it was about 3 months ago now, I think. It was fairly recent. And today, I had to tell somebody who's, one of the landlord's husband came over today to look at the air conditioning disposal in the back, the runoff of the water, which had gotten out of control. And he came inside to check on some things. And then he said, "Oh, that's not the other cat that was here before. It's a different cat." Not that there was anything accusatory about it. He's just making a note. And I said, "Oh yeah, that cat passed away." I said, "Oh." And it was like, it was tough. It's like I had to go back and think about, where, that whole experience. But then out here, we got a big tree out here in the yard, and it's like a pet cemetery. There's I think at least 8 or 9 animals buried under this tree, and that's where Rosie's resting place is over by this tree. Anyway, Kelly, hang in there. Hopefully, we'll give you something to ponder tonight, and hopefully even laugh about. Let's see. Robert knows, but I thought I'd tell you, you're funny, Lana. I do know, and I did tell everybody. Michael, Sister Dina, what's going on? DJ MC, Papa Mike is here. Miss Nikki is here. Who else do we have? There's Thomas Jordan, Bill Smith. Good evening, Bill. Wanda Grantham, wild week, y'all. Show me a week now that isn't wild. It's all wild from here on out. It is the wild unwest. Let's see. Oh, you took the advice on that. Did you? How was your day? I took the day off. How was everybody else's Monday? Did you go to the beach? I went to San Antonio. Let's see. Machata Chihuahua. Machata, I left you a response to a question you asked on Friday's show. So if you haven't seen because you asked me about the event in one day, and I left you some contact info for me via Signal. So if you want to talk to me there, you can do that. Okay. Good to see you here. Diane Evans, you're on time. Guess what? I'm mostly on time. JJ's got a little comment there about cricket powder goodness. So before the whole bug thing took off, the new thing. So when are people, okay, on Twitter, they always have like the thing, whatever the thing is. Like it could be a hypodermic needle. It could be a mask. It could be BLM. It could be a Ukrainian flag. Like, when is the next thing going to be a bug? When are they going to put a cricket on their Twitter seg? Because when they get to the cricket part, the end is near. We are approaching the end when they got the cricket up there. Ukrainian flag, mask, hypodermic needle, BLM, cricket. Oh, don't forget the rainbow. Rainbow's got to be in there too. So before the cricket thing happened, they were selling cricket protein bars down at HEB. I thought, I'll try one. Why not? I'll see what the cricket thing is. But this is before the cricket thing, though. Now I wouldn't eat the cricket thing because everybody's telling you to eat the cricket thing. That's just me. So I tried the cricket bar. It was okay. I didn't taste it. I didn't taste any cricket. So yeah, but now I wouldn't eat it. I wouldn't eat it. Now they're you know what they're doing? They're actually promoting, and I had heard this before, but this is not the first time. Fucking cockroach milk. I swear to God, they're promoting cockroach milk. Cockroach milk has all these incredible nutrients in it. Meanwhile, they're downplaying breast milk. They're destroying formula, whether the formula is tainted or not, I don't know, but they're destroying it. And you remember it was about, I don't know, about 10 years ago when breastfeeding was all the rage. It was like, yeah, whip them out in public. You know, let your kids lactate in public. It was like a big deal, right? It was 10 years ago. And now all of a sudden, oh, breast milk can be really bad for you. Don't give your kids breast milk. Give them cockroach milk. That's really good for them. Just imagine giving your kid fucking cockroach milk. I feel like all of a sudden we're off into Kafka and your kid starts to turn into a bug. All right, who else do we have here? Wisdom Guide, mastic gum is good. I've never been a gum chewer. You play sports, generally you chew gum, especially baseball. King of the Astro Roundtable. Yes, we're all here gathered together. A large round table it is. A bounteous offering for one and all. Most gum has aspartame now. Yeah, I know. It's true. A lot of aspartame, high fructose corn syrup. But then they have those other gums that don't. They're okay. Like Glee gum. If you want to watch a really good documentary, The King of Bubblegum. I've recommended this before. It's fucking amazing. Amazing documentary. Bubblegum, guess what? Has its roots in Mexico. Because the guy who became the king of bubblegum was essentially bringing black market cigarettes from Mexico into the United States and making money off of them. And then he figured out that there was this thing with bubblegum. He became a huge, I think eventually he sold his bubblegum interest to the Wrigley Company. King of Bubblegum. Check out that documentary. It's really good. There he is. Benito. What's going on, Brother Scorpio? Good to see you. Looking forward to seeing you in October. They say to chew gum while you cook so you're not snacking while cooking. That's an interesting concept there. JJ said, I used to have a gum problem. Gum problem or gum chewing problem? You know you're in trouble when you have a gun chewing problem. That when you have the gun chewing problem, you should get help for that. I would recommend you get help. Gun chewing is not healthy for you. Okay. Stay away from it. Steve Letro, we were in Buffalo this week. Hello. Dental work. In your 60s, fix all the chewing of the wrong stuff. You know, I used to have the worst TMJ. I had terrible TMJ. I used to freak my girlfriends out in my 20s when I kissed them. Crack, pop, crack, pop, crack, pop. Right? That happened for a long time. And I remember going to chiropractors and all kinds of people to deal with my TMJ. And the thing that really cured me of my TMJ was the one thing you would not think would cure you of your TMJ. At least I didn't. And it was not eating gluten. Once I dropped gluten, I remember I was off of gluten for about 3 weeks. I'm like, no snap, crackle, pop is gone. I don't know what the connection is. There are smarter people in the world that may know that, but it was just like gone. Wow. Amazing. No more TMJ. And the other big revelation for me, I still have some back issues, but not the same ones I used to have. I used to have like really bad inflammation in my back, and I mean it was painful at times. So I spent a lot of money going to the chiropractor again to fix my back. And then Alexandra, I knew this woman, Alexandra, I think she's still a Facebook friend, super nice person. And she turned me onto the Stephen Gundry diet. And I went to the Gundry diet. I went to his website, and I think I listened to a couple of YouTube videos, and he talked about legumes, which I had known about, by the way. I had known about legumes for a long time, but I had backslid on my intake of legumes. Legumes are peanuts and beans and corn. Those are the three main offenders: peanuts, beans, and corn. There are others that are in there too. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, what are they? Chia seeds. Thank you. Chia seeds are a legume, right? So I had to get rid of these legumes because they are incredibly inflammatory, really inflammatory. So I stopped taking. I forced myself to not eat the legumes. Peanuts were easy to get over, not a problem. Corn, yeah, pretty easy. Although I was a huge corn on the cob fan, but that was pretty easy. I'll tell you, the one thing that was really hard for me to kick was, well, corn chips. Those were hard for me to kick. Although now Siete has corn-free and gluten-free tortilla chips, which I appreciate them so much. But the corn chips, that was hard. Corn tortillas was really hard. Corn on the cob wasn't too hard. Cream corn, which I love, that was hard. But the big culprit was refried beans, because I love refried beans and black beans. And that was kind of difficult. Like, okay, I'm gonna within 3 weeks after that, most of my back shit was done. I had like one appointment with the chiropractor. I said, this is my last appointment. I think I cured, I'm not perfect, but I cured a large part of this. And he was curious. He says, how did you do it? I said, I stopped eating the legumes because they have lectins in them. And the lectins were creating all this inflammation in my back. And I'm sure he didn't want me to say that too loudly because it was a big open space. And it was an interesting space because it was like some chiropractors, if you go to their office, they'll have different offices. Like you're here. But this is like one big open space. So if you were saying something, like other people could hear it. And I think he probably knew, right? Or if he didn't know, he had an inkling. All right. Who else do we have here? Michelle, what's going on, Michelle? Greetings. Oh, Kelly, you got a dose of Jasper. There we go. Anna Sophia. Hello, Anna. Diane Evans is here. Hi, Diane. All right. We got a pretty good house tonight. When you start to look like your pet, I would be grateful if I looked like Jasper. That's a handsome cat right there. That is a handsome cat. So if I started to look like Jasper, I'd consider that a good thing. Amanda Fox. Yeah, everybody loves Jasper. 2 sick kitties this past week, but doing better. Good. Doing my time. That is an interesting handle. Nevad 17 Astrology. Nevad, did you get a hold of me on Telegram or Signal? I'm still there. Speaking of Bliss, there she is. Should we do a little pitch for our pal, LA Bliss? Why don't we do that? Let's get a little LA Bliss. The voting starts up tomorrow. And we are on the Bliss train. We're going to ride the Bliss train all the way to the Hollywood Bowl, where our friend L.A. Bliss has been just absolutely crushing this vote. The openact.com. She's now a quarterfinalist. So L.A. Bliss took first place in their group and has advanced to the quarterfinals. Voting to determine the next opening act resumes Monday, August 22nd. Stay tuned. So as of tomorrow, you'll be able to go in and start to vote for her again. And I guess what quarterfinals, and then you would have what is it? The quarterfinals. Quarterfinals get you into the finals, right? Because with the quarterfinals, but they have also the second place finishers are in there. So I'm not quite sure how this works, but we're getting down to the end, I think. And she's been a shooting star across the sky of this competition. So you can go to openact.com/2022 /L-L-Bliss. And let's see if we can get one of our Chatarians into the big show there. That'd be awesome. That'd be totally awesome. Okay, where is everybody else? Where'd y'all go? You're back here. Shirley's here. Speaking of the Beach Boys, saw them last night in concert with the Temptations and the Four Tops. Oh my God. Okay. My first question with that would be, how many original members are in those bands? If you have at least one, I think Mike Love is still in the Beach Boys. I don't know about the Temptations and the Four Tops because I know Eddie Kendricks is dead. David Ruffin is dead. By the way, Eddie was my favorite Temptation. And of course, what was his name? Levi Stubbs for the Four. I saw the Four Tops. I did see them back in the 80s. They were really good. And I hope you had a good time, Cheryl. Let's see. Who else do we have? Provocateur astrologer. Doesn't Brian Wilson have dementia? Yeah, but he doesn't know it. Diane's got her reservations all made. Look, all right, Diane. Looking forward to seeing you. Bernays Sauce checking in. Just shared link again today. The way you calculate a cat's age is close to 7-year myth than with dogs. Generally speaking, the math for cat years equivalent to human years is roughly 1 cat year to every 6 to 7 human years. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's what I thought. So Jasper is he's at least 77. Or if it's 6, he's 66. I think he's probably closer to 66. Mike Love is the only original one with still with the band. See, that's what I thought. Sheila Sampson is here. Hi, Sheila. Who is Sam Harris? You're going to find out. Neem says the Aries cooking up ideas so strange. Sam is in flames. Hi, Daniel M. Good evening to you. Let's see. Have we reached the end here? Gucci the Goats is here. What's going on, Jake? Jasper made an appearance. Yeah, he's not on the bed. So I have a subwoofer, and the suit is on the subwoofer. So he's on the subwoofer. Catherine Rose and Gemini Mars. Woohoo. Meow Meow cats between 14 and 20 years. They do. Stahl behind blue eyes is here. Is Ani here? Did I see Ani? I saw an Ani mention. Let's see. Pote News, Holly Beth. Let's see. I hope Ani's here. Ani's like doing a new stream. Dr. Laura Wilson is here. Hello, Dr. Laura Wilson. Tondar and Wildebeest. Also, the Wildebeest is also known as the New. Who knew? but that's their no. We watch the Namibia channel, the Namibia camera channel. You guys ever watch that? It's like the most ambient thing you can ever watch on television, mostly. Let me see what they got going on there. It's probably dark right there right now. Let's see what we got. So we watched this Namibia channel. And it's the Namibia cam live stream. Let's see what's going on there right now. So we'll check in with the Namibia cam. Let's do that. See, right now it's too late at night. So you can see the night cam, and there's this water hole here. It's pretty shallow, but it's always got water in it. And this area over here is generally pretty damp. They got a salt lick over here and a salt lick over here. Every now and then at night, you'll be able to see the eyes of the desert critters pop up. But the wildebeest is kind of the king of the water hole, I have to say. Whenever the wildebeest shows up, the other animals kind of split. They have an interesting cohabitation with the oryx. The oryx are beautiful. They got these really long horns, right? And the oryx sometimes, it almost feels like they're aware that they're being watched because they will look at the camera. Like the oryx will look at the camera from time to time. The wildebeest, they don't give a shit. They're just like, get out of here. This is our hole. It's like interesting watching the hierarchies around that little Namibia water hole. All right, let's get into the show. Thank you, everybody, for being here and participating, because you all participate, even though you're not actively participating. Oh, before I jump into it, I do want to give a shout out to the sponsor of the show. And that is True Hemp Science. And True Hemp Science has been really a godsend for a lot of people who have been interested in CBD. What's interesting about CBD is that it's been around for a while. I remember the first time I had a dose of CBD was probably around maybe 2017 or 2018, right around there. And it was so weird because we had a health food store in town, which is kind of morphed and pivoted into a different kind of store, but it still sells CBD. And somebody had actually bought, this is around 2018, I think. And somebody actually bought some CBD from this health food store, and they got pulled over by a cop, Texas cop. And they had to tell the cop where they got the fucking CBD. So the cop went to the health food store and took all their CBD, confiscated all of it. This is in 2018. Now you go to 7-Eleven to get the CBD. That's how far we've come in 4 years with the lack of demonization around CBD. So it seems to be pretty ubiquitous, but not a lot of people really know about it. And not all CBD is created equally. It all comes from the same plant, but it is not all created equally. And this is what my friend Christopher Lynch at True Hemp Science has figured out, and he sources only the highest and absolute best of the cannabis plant in order to produce, distribute, sell high quality CBD products. And the great thing about this is that it's a human experience. I mean, how often do you go through life now where something just is not human? You talk to, 20, I'll be less hyperbolic. Let's say half a dozen prompts on a call, and none of those prompts are going to be human related. And then finally, when you do get to somebody, and again, I'm not being xenophobic, but they're not always in the same time zone, if you know what I'm saying. And sometimes those people can be very helpful, and sometimes they can be less than helpful. It's a crapshoot, right? But if you have any questions about CBD, and there's a contact form or contact link here on Chris's website, and you call up, you'll either get Chris or Nate or anybody else that's working there, and they will answer your questions. And Chris is incredibly generous for this time. And I can't tell you how many emails and texts I've gotten which have championed Chris's ability to take time, explain things. This does this, this does this, this does this, right? So he's not just there to say, oh, I know exactly what you need. You need this, right? You need this, and and you need 3 months of it. Like, that's not how this works. So, number one, you're dealing with somebody who's got some integrity, because you'll talk to them personally, and he has an amazing capacity to take something very complex and then bringing it to something very simple so you'll understand. Add that to the quality CBD, both for you as a human and your pets. We were talking about cats, and then dogs are in the mix as well. He's got CBD for animals. Anyway, you can go here, truehempscience.com/ref/23. And if you get $100 worth of product, when you check out, add 15, that's 15, capital MINS, and guess what you'll get? You'll get more product thrown in there for, as a little bonus, as a little thank you from Chris and coming through this gateway and portal. And if you get $150 or more, your shipping is free. So help out our sponsor, All Boats Rise. And so far, we've been doing this since March, and the results have been just absolutely fantastic for everybody involved. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get to the chart of the moment, but I'm going to kind of work backwards. And what I want to do, since we're going to be dealing with Aries, we're going to start with Aries tonight, and we're going to start with Sam Harris. So if you're not familiar with Sam Harris, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little bit of a background with Sam Harris and what he represents, and what's quote unquote made him famous until last week, which made him famous in a different kind of way, where his astrological sign is really showing its vivid colors. So let's do this. Let me give you a visual. All right. So I can come up with an image here. Okay. So this is one of the famous images of the dark intellectual web, which Sam Harris was clearly considered to be a founding member of. Not a formal, but mostly, I would say, informal sort of version of their little uncool cool kids group. So here you have, of course, the Weinstein brothers right here and right there. I think that's Heather Heyer, who is his wife, if I'm not mistaken. Then you have Joe Rogan, who is part of the intellectual dark web. And then you have this guy. I always forget his name. Dave Rubin. That's Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin, everybody's famous gay atheist conservative. Then you have, if I'm not mistaken, is that Jordan Peterson over there? Let me see. I don't think so. I don't think it's Jordan Peterson. Anyway, that's Sam Harris. Sam Harris is one of the quote unquote founding members of the intellectual dark web. So I'm just going to do a quick like Wikipedia rundown. Here we go. Meet the renegades of the intellectual dark web. These guys were coming out right around the same time as the alt-right. And this is a Barry Weiss, who is actually a member of the intellectual dark web. And she was a liberal, and I guess she got the memo, and she says, I'm out of here. I was meeting with Sam Harris, a neuroscientist, Eric Weinstein, a mathematician, and managing director of Thiel Capital. The commentator and comedian Dave Rubin and their spouses in a Los Angeles restaurant talking about how they were turned into heretics. A decade ago, they argued when Donald Trump was still hosting The Apprentice, none of these observations would have been considered taboo. Today, people who like them, who dare venture into this there be dragons territory on the intellectual map, have met with outrage and derision. You know what's really interesting? Is a lot of people were talking about this shit way before these people, okay? It's like all of a sudden now they became something of, I think that guy was Douglas Murray. That's who that guy was. There's Christina Hoff Sommers. Whether they were leopard print. All right, who else do we have? There he is. The wide one, Joe Rogan. Yes, and there's Brett and Heather, husband and wife, amongst the lush beauty of the Pacific Northwest rainforest. Because he was in Olympia. He's not there anymore. At least I don't think. Now there's Sam Harris. We're going to talk about him. Anybody else? That's Douglas Murray, right? Oh, Michael Shermer. I don't know who this guy is. Honestly, I think I'm fairly familiar with these people. Some of you may know more about him. I do not know anything about Michael Shermer. Is he that dark or that intellectual? I don't know. There's Dave Rubin. I guess she talked about Mike Cernovich, Stefan Molyneux. Like there's this weird crossover between the dark intellectual web and the alt-right. Anyway, let me give you a little bit more of a thumbnail on Sam Harris before we dive in on his chart, which I have here, because we do talk about astrology, believe it or not, and why Sam Harris is in hot water and why his astrological sign is preventing him from understanding that. So we're just going to get into his Wikipedia page really, really quickly. His mother was a producer and writer in Hollywood, Susan Harris. You'll know some of the things that she was famous for. Samuel Benjamin Harris, born April 9th. There's your Aries kicking in, 1967, is an American philosopher. Islam and the Future of Tolerance. Philosopher, author, and podcast host. His work touches on a wide range of topics, including rationality, religion, ethics, free will, neuroscience, meditation, psychedelics, philosophy of mind, politics, terrorism, and artificial intelligence. Harris came to prominence for his criticism of religion and Islam in particular. So what's that going to do? Well, if he criticizes religion, he's going to win over the atheist crowd and the pro-science crowd. If he criticizes Islam, he'll win over the far right and the Judeo world, because of course Sam Harris happens to be Jewish. So he's checking a lot of boxes there by being anti-religion and anti-Muslim. Well, of course, he's not anti-Judaism, but that's another topic for another show. and is known as one of the four horsemen of the new atheism, along with Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, and Daniel Dennett. Harris's first book, The End of Faith, won the Penn Martha Albrand Award for first nonfiction, remained on the New York Times bestseller list for that interesting number of 33 weeks. Harris has since written 6 additional books: Letter to a Christian Nation, The Moral Landscape, How Science Can Determine Human Values, and the long-form essay Lying in 2011, the short book Free Will in 2012, Waking Up, The Guide to Spirituality Without Religion. And with British writer Maajid Nawaz, Islam and the Future of Tolerance, a dialogue. Harris's work has been translated into over 20 languages. So the word on the street is he happens to be a really smart guy, and he has no problem with letting you know about that. Harris has debated many prominent figures on the topics of God or religion, including William Lane Craig, Jordan Peterson, Rick Warren, Andrew Sullivan, Reza Aslan, David Wolpe, Deepak Chopra, Ben Shapiro, and Gene Houston. You know, I'd like to see him debate Royce White. It's another Aries. That'd be fun. Anyway, Harris hosted the Making Sense podcast, originally titled Waking Up, which has a large listenership. I think that listenership shrunk considerably over the last few days. In September 2018, Harris released a meditation app, Waking Up with Sam Harris. Harris's views on free will, race, and Islam have attracted controversy. He's one of the original core members of the so-called intellectual dark web. So where does he come from? LA, his mother, Susan niece Spivak, created Soap and the Golden Girls. His father, born in North Carolina, came from a Quaker background. And his mother is Jewish, not religious. He was raised by his mother following his parents' divorce when he was age 2. His father was like, my bad. That's Don Nelson. We're going to go there later. Let's go back to Sam Harris, though. His father was like a movie cowboy. All right, so where else does this go? Well, he stated he was not raised as an atheist, so he's probably raised as, what do they call it, a non-observant Jew, I think. While his original major was in English, Harris became interested in philosophical questions while at Stanford University after an experience with MDMA. The experience led him to be interested in the idea that he might be able to achieve spiritual insights without the use of drugs. Well, that's a novel thought. Leaving Stanford in his second year, a quarter after his psychoactive experience, he visited India, Nepal, where he studied meditation with the teachers of Buddhist and Hindu religions, including Dogo Khyentse. 11 years later, in 1997, returned to Stanford, completing a BA philosophy. In 2000, Harris began writing his first book, The End of Faith. Immediately after the September 11 attacks, he received a PhD in cognitive neuroscience in 2009 from the University of California, Los Angeles, using functional magnetic resonance imaging to conduct research into the neural basis of belief, disbelief, and uncertainty. His thesis was titled A Moral Landscape, How Science Can Determine Human Values. His advisor was Mark S. Cohen. I think Mark S. Cohen was also the advisor, if I'm not mistaken, of the Weinsteins. Am I right about that? Let me just see if I'm right about that. I just have to, this is for my own edification. Maybe not. Sam Harris, Dr. said, nope, I was wrong. Anyway, I seem to know that. Okay. So what can we like derive from understanding the profile about this fellow and his astrological sign? He's in his fucking head. Right? He's in his head. He studies neurosciences. That's an Aries thing. He's going to try to pioneer something, which is how can you achieve spiritual states without using drugs? Although that's not very pioneering. A lot of people have attempted that, who have had said drugs, right? Neuroimaging, the maps of the mind, all those sorts of things, right? And if there is a sign that relates to atheism, and I'm not saying there is one sign that any sign could relate to atheism, I would think it's Aries, honestly. I would think it's Aries because Aries would be centered on the belief of the self. Am I right? That outside of the self, there is no other thing, or everything is self. So that's where Harris's philosophical, scientific, and worldview comes from. It's here. It's up here. It's mapping the mind, mapping the brain. What is up here? Right? And then when he has been on plenty of podcasts, and he is always considered to be the smartest guy in the room. And he has a tendency to be able to back his beliefs with some kind of very logical, very rational explanation. And has been known to be, in some ways, quite dismissive of other people who may not be as smart as Sam in a lot of ways. Let me see if I can find the actual video. Some of you are probably aware of this. Oh, it's interesting. Okay, so we're going to go Sam Harris, Triggernometry interview. Okay, I'm going to try to find a clip. I don't want to watch. I don't want to have the whole thing here. But he was on a podcast called Triggernometry. What's really interesting now is as I'm going through the Triggernometry interview, you can't just get the clip, right? There aren't a bunch of clips. Let me show you the. So this is the. Well, you can see it. It's right there. If I can screen share. All right. Let me see if I can go to Triggernometry. Let me see if I can find the actual clip. Let me see. I'll get out of YouTube in a second. Let me do this. Let's see if I can try to find this. Because it was making the rounds on. Oh, this is really interesting. Oh, wow. All right. Check this out. So I just did a search, and you can see Sam Harris Trigonometry clip. It looks like the results below are changing quickly. Oh, I wonder why. If this topic is new, it can sometimes take time for reliable sources to publish information. Check the source. Are they trusted on this topic? I've never seen this before with YouTube. I'm sorry, with Google, which is a shit search engine. This is really, really interesting. Really interesting. Oh, let's try this. Let's go to let's try this. Hey, Lauren here. Let's talk about. All right, so we're gonna have to go through her shit. And by the way, Lauren, no offense, but you're gonna spend 11 minutes to get to the interview. It's all right. All right, I get it. No worries. It's your show. So we're gonna play. I found it, but that was really interesting with Google. I'd never seen that before. So I'm gonna play you this clip, and then we're gonna jump into Sam Harris's chart, so I can begin to show you the effect of Chiron here. Keep in mind he's an Aries, and I have said this before. I'll say it again, and I don't say it with. And again, I like every sign. All right, just please remember that every sign is wonderful in its own way, like the starry night on a cold winter's day, or whatever the fuck that song is. Remember Ray Stevens? Everything is beautiful in its own way. That's how I feel about signs, including Aries. All right. So here, you got that. All right. Let me just make sure. I gotta pull out here because you need to hear the video. That's so weird about those search results. They are protecting Sam Harris, Google running cover. All right, here we go. He's gonna talk about Hunter Biden. He's gonna talk about Trump, and away we go.
Well, Hunter Biden, at that point, Hunter Biden literally could have had the corpses of children in his basement. I would not have cared, right? It's like there's nothing. First of all, it's Hunter Biden, right? It's not Joe Biden. But even if Joe,
okay, so many people have played this clip and stopped it everywhere along the way, just like I'm about to do it. Remember, this is an Aries. Now, his Mercury's in a different position in Aries, and I'll bet you that you probably could guess what position it's in. And it ain't Taurus. That leaves one other sign. But he's very forceful in proclaiming, well, it's not Joe Biden. I mean, this is the hubris of somebody who has written a bunch of books, and I'm sure there's probably some interesting content in his books. It's not hard. It's not easy to write a book, by the way. I respect people who can just write a book, but then there's another level of respect that comes with what the book says. That's if they actually write the book. That's a whole different story. Anyway, but he's been lionized as somebody who is this great intellectual power. And then what happens is that these people start to drink their own Kool-Aid. It's like, yeah, let me have another one. Let me have another one. Let me have another one, right? So they may have a bias or an opinion, which clearly he does, that even with all the, gigawatts in his head, the trillions of theoretical gigawatts in his head, he cannot make the connection to the point that Hunter Biden is on the payroll of Chinese and Ukrainian companies, both, and that we're in a theoretical war with Russia, proxy war, even if you think it's a script, and I think a lot of it is scripted, but nonetheless, right? Let's say Joe Biden, whoever's playing Joe Biden at this time, again, we have to have a lot of caveats here in this. But if, let's say, the Joe Biden character said, "Ah, damn it, I'm not going to have another war. They're malarkey." I'm sorry, Joe, but your son has taken a shit ton of money from us, and so have you, and it's all on the public record. We should really do everything in our power to what's his name? Saul Alinsky. Let's back Alinsky. Like, you got to be kidding me. This guy can't even connect those dots, and he's supposed to be, this mega brain. Okay, so that's the only thing I'm going to say here. I'm going to let you watch the rest of it, and then we'll get into his chart, and I'll show you why he's in trouble astrologically.
Oh, but even whatever scope of Joe Biden's corruption is, if we could just go down that rabbit hole endlessly and understand that he's getting kickbacks from Hunter Biden's deals in Ukraine or wherever else.
Okay. He knows what's going on. He knows that he's getting kickbacks. Yeah, and he's fucking president. He's president, and guess what? He is being compromised. And he's really okay with that. I said I wasn't going to say anything. I promise I won't say nothing. Here we go.
Else, right? Or China. It is infinitesimal compared to the corruption we know Trump is involved in. It's like a firefly to the sun, right? I mean, there's just, it doesn't.
Okay. I broke my promise. This guy, not the one with the glasses, the other guy. I'm going to slow this down. I'm just going to slow this down for a second. You're gonna hear this in slow motion and see it. Watch the guy's face. And I'm going to speed it back up again. Here we go.
Trump is involved in. It's like a firefly to the sun, right? I mean, like there's just it doesn't even stack up against Trump University, right? Trump University as a story is worse than anything that could be in Hunter Biden's laptop.
Can you believe that? She's got the same look on her face. Lauren, you look great. You look great. I'm sure you have some wonderful things to say. And we're going to kind of move on here because you're doing the same thing I am. My apologies. It's the only place I can find it. Let's go back to real-time speed. And here we go.
Not have looked at the laptop in a timely way and to have shut down the New York Post's Twitter account like that. That's just a conspiracy. That's a left-wing conspiracy to deny the presidency to Donald Trump.
Look how
absolutely it was. Absolutely.
He's so pleased with
right?
himself.
But I think it was warranted. Right. And again, it's a coin toss as to whether or not
Sam, I'm sorry.
That particular piece.
I'm really sorry. I was the one that said we should move on, but you've just said something I really struggle with there, which is
the kids in the basement?
The kids in the basement. I'm interested in democracy. You're saying you are content with a left-wing conspiracy to prevent somebody being democratically re-elected as president.
Well, no, I'm content. Well, but the thing is, it's just not left wing, right? So Liz Cheney is not left wing.
All right, that is a fucking Aries right there. Okay, again, if you're an Aries, I'm sure that there is an applicable in righteous manifestation of that expression. In this case, it's not. It's not. So basically, what he's just done is he said that. Well, it's not just a left-wing conspiracy. Now he's going to quote Liz Cheney. Okay, Liz Cheney. So if he was sort of dangling by catgut, Jasper, don't listen to that. If he was dangling by catgut there, once he dropped Liz Cheney, that was it. That was it. He's invoking Liz Cheney as being part of the side that's righteous here. Okay, let me keep going.
Right, Liz Cheney is doing everything in her power
to prevent somebody being democratically elected.
But there's nothing conspiracy. It's not. It was a conspiracy out in the open. But it doesn't matter if it was. It doesn't matter what part's conspiracy, what part's out in the open. I mean, I think it's like if people get together and talk about what should we do about this phenomenon. You know, if it's like. If there was an asteroid.
All right, here we go. This is his Aries, like, hey, I'm doubling down, I'm tripling down, I'm quadrupling down on this because I'm just smarter than you, and people believe that I'm smarter than you. And I was on the New York Times bestsellers list for 33 weeks. I'm going to use the most stupid fucking metaphor or analogy that I can come up with. And most of the time, people are going to believe this hook, line, and sinker. And I'm betting you will too, because, well, that's just who I am. Here we go.
Hurtling toward Earth. And we got in a room together with all of our friends and had a conversation about what we could do to deflect its course, right? Is that a conspiracy?
Yikes. So essentially.
Lauren, thank you for allowing me to use your website and your YouTube channel. I'll subscribe to you. Just for the use of using your YouTube channel, I'll become a subscriber. So, did you hear that? He basically said, well, if there was an asteroid approaching the Earth, and you and your friends got together and said, what can we do in order to prevent that asteroid? Do you know what you'd get? You'd get that movie, The Goonies. That's what you'd get. Or whatever the other movie was that had the kids in space movie that was like the Goonies. I think Ethan Hawke was in that movie too, where the three kids have their little spaceship. That's what you'd fucking get. That's where Sam Harris's brain is at. It's back in an adolescent movie from the 1980s where you and your friends are going to get together and save the world from an asteroid. Like, that's his analogy for Donald Trump. Donald Trump is an extinction level event. And he lied. He just said it was a left-wing conspiracy and it was out in the open. But then, and this is an Aries thing, I'm going to get to his chart. Instead of saying, you know what? Let me backtrack that. Let me reframe this a little bit. I apologize if I said it was a left-wing conspiracy. You'll never hear him apologize. When you hear an Aries apologize, and again, they're here to show us certain things. Every sign is here to show us certain things, good and bad. Like, that's the nature of astrology and duality. So on the plus side with Aries, straight ahead. You know, the rest of you get to kind of adjust your sails or learn or not learn from our approach. Well, we're learning right now. Thank you, Sam. So it's very difficult for him. Is, you know what? Let me go back. I apologize for just invoking the left-wing conspiracy. There were people on both sides who really didn't want Donald Trump to become president again because they felt that it would not be in the best interest of the country. I think Liz Cheney's one. I'm sure there's more. He could have done that, but he didn't do that. He tried to justify what he was saying by invoking Liz Cheney. Not a great answer. Not a great reply. All right, so I'm going to get into his chart now, and I'm going to show you here, like one of the tricky parts of his chart. I don't know his birth time; it's not listed on AstroTheme. So I put his birth time at 12 noon, right there. So if you want to play with a time, right, in a chart where you don't know what the time is, there's a couple different things that you can do. You can make it a sunrise chart, or you can make it a 12 noon chart. He's a public figure. I have no idea, but you know what his rising sign is. But he's a public figure. I'm putting his sun right up there as a result of the 12 noon chart. So I'm going to make this bigger because we're going to get into old Sam's chart here. Okay. All right. So what do we have here? We have an Aries sun right here. And then we have the Aries moon. And this moon is not a new moon. It is a balsamic moon. And it is, I believe, that the Aries balsamic moon is one of the hardest balsamic moons you can have, period. And I've known people with balsamic Scorpio moons. I've known people with balsamic Cancer moons. Those moons generally are easier over time at letting go. People that have balsamic moons in general, this is my interpretation of balsamic moon. If you want to invoke the phrase old soul, they kind of have that. And it's usually because they have to let go of things from an early age. So what happens when you have to let go of things, you grow faster. But the reason why it's called the balsamic moon, and most of you who are watching this already know this, but in case you're not, you don't know it, that when the moon is new, literally it would have to be at like 1920 to be a new moon. It's at 1813. This is not a new moon. It is still behind the sun, right? So if it was a full moon, it would be all the way over here, and it would be the ripeness. The new moon is the planting of the seed. It's the planting of the seed. A lot of people that are born with new moons tend to have lots of experiences, right? The cup is empty. They want to fill the cup. That is the definition of new moon people. They are emotionally thirsty to drink in as much as they can, right? It's new. Fill me up. You get to the full moon, it is a full cup. People born on a full moon generally deal with things like culmination. It's a culmination lifetime. Your emotional content is out there for the rest of the world to see. all the different phases of the moon represent a different aspect of an individual and what they're here to do. Right? When we get to the balsamic moon, that means that the moon has been through every single phase. It has not become new, so it is ripe. Right? It is ripe. It has become fermented. Fermented. So if we think of, let's say, well, like grape juice, right? By the time it comes around, it's not quite wine, although you could probably get drunk off of it. But we think of balsamic vinegar, right? Vinegar that whatever starts off gets to this balsamic phase. And then what happens? It's dissipation. You have to let go. That doesn't mean that Sam Harris does not emotionally connect with his feelings. Au contraire, Aries doesn't want to let go. It doesn't want to let go. It's like, no, this is my thought, my feeling, my opinion. Also in this chart, whether it's balsamic or new, what do we see here? We see the connection with the mother. He took his mother's name, right? Well, I take that back. His mother took the name of the man she married. So, but that's who he identifies with, is his mother, Susan Harris. So we see a very close relationship with his mother. If I was his wife, I'd be a little, I would be a little curious about that. Not curious in the sense they did anything wrong. No, I'm not saying that it was so close that it'd be that strange. Don't get me wrong here. But I would assume, right, that it would almost be like any woman who comes into his life, his mother would be a rival in some ways, because that's how Aries works, right? Aries deals with conflict. So aside from that, what else do we have? Well, we got a Jupiter square here to the sun. You know what that means? It means you're going to double down. Like you're just got like, I'm so smart and I'm so wise that I'm going to double down. Hey, you know, if you want to publish a book, you got a Jupiter square, it can be helpful. You'll work hard towards that and it could pay off. But Jupiter squares, like you can be engaged in hubris when you're not even really aware of how much hubris you're engaged in with a Jupiter square. You know, look, I've got a Jupiter square in my chart, so I have to watch out. Like I have to watch out for sometimes thinking, oh, you're a fucking know-it-all, right? No, you got to watch out for this. And I got a Virgo sun, so it helps me out a little bit. But here he's got an Aries sun. It's like, no, straight ahead. The Jupiter square. Don't get attached to the part of fortune because it's only based on this birth time. If it was a different birth time, it could be in a different house altogether. So he's got that, right? He's got that. Then he's got this Mars opposition, another double down effect. And it's in Libra, right? So what do we know about Mars and Libra? It has to have a cause. Again, I've said this before, I'll say it again. Mars and Libra is the SJW aspect. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she's got it, right? She is the archetype of Mars and Libra. You need a cause. If you got the right cause, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it. But it is a Mars that is related to activism. Because with Libra, it's always like trying to balance things out. You know, human rights, gay rights, dog rights, cat rights, Hunter Biden rights, corpses in the basement rights, all those things, right? So he's got this Sun-Mars opposition. So when he gets in trouble with his sun, where can he go? Well, he'll fucking double down with Jupiter, right? And he's got this T-square where Jupiter squares Mars, and all of a sudden he's into conflation territory, which is where he was in that interview. Big time conflation territory. Not only that, but he's got an inconjunct with Venus and Mars. And the other aspect of the inconjunct is going to be, let's see, Chiron. We're going to get into Chiron. So he's a yod. He's got a yod with Mars. Like Mars in his chart, pretty challenged. opposite sun. So he's going to fight for his beliefs. And it's retrograde. So really, he should learn how to back off. And then squaring Jupiter, big T square. Big T square. Now, you know, it's interesting. I've got this T square too, but it's different. My Mars is in Cancer. It's in the 8th house. My sun is in Virgo up here, and my Jupiter is over here in the 1st house. It's a little bit different, right? A little bit different. And again, Mars in the 4th house. Who's going to be the dominant figure in his life? It's his mother, right? This is the house of the mother, the home. Divorced his father at 10. South Node in Scorpio. I don't think he had an easy home life, by the way. Even if he grew up in Hollywood and he had all that privilege, because Soap and the Golden Girls were really fucking, especially the Golden Girls. Golden Girls was really successful, went into syndication. Like, you make money off that shit, right? But I don't think it mattered. All right, so let's go back up here. So these are just some of the aspects that he's having to deal with. Wherever they are, they can be in different houses. He's going to have this T square. Period. End of story. Look where Chiron is. There's Chiron right there, right? So we have Chiron at 15. So it's 3 degrees off of his moon, and it is within 4 degrees of his sun. That's what so there are a couple of things you're witnessing here with him. Number one, Neptune Mercury conjunction. He's got Mercury in Pisces. That's his drug mind, by the way. So Mercury had gone pretty retrograde. By the time he's born, it's direct. 23 Pisces, conjunct Chiron. So in a lot of ways, if you have a Mercury Chiron conjunction, you would definitely want to look into the mind. You would definitely want to look into the mind for sure. You'd want to understand how the brain works. Mercury is up here, right, communicating, and Chiron would look into consciousness. It really, with consciousness in Pisces, look into consciousness. And one of the things that I've said about Chiron in Pisces people, when we deal with Chiron, we talk about the moon, and I've gone through Chiron generationally. And Chiron and Pisces people are what? They're heretics. They reject religion, they reject dogma, and they have to find their own belief system. That's exactly what Sam Harris is doing, right? And that part, he's living his chart. Like, can you find spirituality without religion? Hello? That is fucking Chiron and Pisces. He's living his chart. So I'm not here to diss him for that. Not at all. What I'm here to show is that his thinking is clouded. Look at transiting Neptune. It's at 24 degrees. It's retrograding right onto his Mercury. Like that is like, if you have a Mercury Neptune conjunction in your chart, you better be really clear about what you're saying. Like, at that point in your life, you should be writing a fiction book, because really what Sam Harris was spewing was fictional. That's exactly what he was spewing, a fiction. No matter how bad Trump University was. Trump was, and again, I am not here to stand up for Donald Trump. Okay, I'm not. We're going to look at Trump a little bit later, because somebody sent me a little request on Twitter, and I'm open to your requests. And I'm going to look at his chart from a little bit of a different perspective than I think the original person had asked me to. But if you got a Neptune Mercury conjunction, you better start looking at fiction, because what he was spewing was a fiction. There's no way that Trump University is even remotely close to whatever happened with Hunter and Joe and China and Burisma and Ukraine and the big guy and Poroshenko and all that shit. And now we got billions of dollars going to Ukraine on a monthly basis now. It's like the Columbia Record Club. You remember that? You got 9 of these things for a certain price, but then you're on the hook for buying an album a month for the next 20 years or whatever it is. That's what it is with Ukraine. It's like the Columbia Record Club. So he's got Neptune on Mercury. And what he's trying to do now are using these far-flung analogies. Well, let's say there's an asteroid and you're in a room with Ethan Hawke, and let's say River Phoenix was still alive, and Corey Feldman and Corey Haim were there, but instead of, trying to find out whether or not they've been molested, they were like their characters from, the movies that we know and love about them. Let's say they were there in that room. Oh, and just to be, I guess, equal, why don't we throw in, let's say Bridget Fonda, like a younger version of Bridget Fonda, but she's kind of like how she evolves in the American version of La Femme Nikita. Okay, so she's part of that team. Let's say you're all in that room together, and then you have to think about an asteroid that's going to hit this is what he's fucking doing. The Neptune and Mercury is clouding his mind. He is unaware. He is unaware of the impact of what he's saying, because he's had this Sun-Jupiter conjunction, Mars-Jupiter conjunction, and Mars-Jupiter square, Sun-Jupiter square, and he hasn't like been called on this now. Now he's got Neptune retrograding. It goes back to 19, I think. He's going to go through Neptune-Pluto opposition one more time. What's going to happen to him with that? Well, you've just lost a lot of popularity, son. And the Neptune opposition to Uranus is very quick. Now, he's in Aries. He'll probably blow it off. He'll try to do something, completely, I don't know. He won't acknowledge it. He'll just move on. But I can also tell you that he's way more attached to his feelings than a lot of people might think he is, because that's the Sun-Moon conjunction. You don't see how he feels. You just see his sun. Well, he's kind of a dark intellectual atheist. And that's what you get. But really, he does have some emotional content, but you don't really see it. He does get connected to it's almost too close. That's the mother as well. And there's Chiron. Chiron's not going to stop. Chiron's going to keep moving forward and forward and forward. So by the end of the year, he's going to have Chiron on his moon, Chiron on his sun. To me, the biggest thing that he could do with this Chiron transit ultimately is to admit he was wrong. If he could do that with this Chiron transit, he will grow tremendously. He'll grow tremendously. And not because he wants the so-called, because they're conservatives, because he was lumped in with all those other people. Like, conservatives love Dave Rubin. He's their favorite homosexual conservative. They love him. Oh, he stands up for the right things. He's anti-grooming. We love Dave Rubin. We love his husband. We love his kids when, they're birthing persons, bring them into their lives, right? So he's on Ben Shapiro's show or network. Oh, we love Ben Shapiro. I don't love Ben Shapiro. I don't want to get into Ben Shapiro, but I'm not in love with Ben Shapiro at all. In fact, I think he's I think he's a 3-card Monty guy. That's just me. Anyway, so if you're on that side, oh, I love Jordan Peterson. His battle against the pronouns, so inspiring. Look at him. He was ahead of the curve. Look at him now, right? He's on Ben Shapiro's network, by the way. Oh, I love Joe Rogan. Look, Joe Rogan stood up for hydroxychloroquine. He had all those doctors on his show. And, the left wants to bring him down all the time. So it would be easy, because Sam Harris is in that constellation, that you would really love Sam Harris. Look, I'm an astrologer, so I have to develop a relationship with all the luminaries that I think is functional and reasonable in my own world. But there are some people that hate fucking planets. I fucking hate Saturn. I hate Saturn. Saturn sucks. It sucks. Or I fucking hate Pluto. Pluto, fucking bastard. I went through this Pluto transit. You'll run into people like that. I swear, just hang out on Twitter for a while. You'll run into people like that, right? That said, you know, in the dark intellectual web, all those planets to the conservative base have been wonderful because they've all been to some degree either anti-pronoun, pro-speech, pro-free speech, or pro-free choice, especially when it comes to health choice, although Sam Harris wasn't that way. He and Joe Rogan had a falling out. So it's easy to get lumped in with a group and gain some deal of credibility. He's going to lose it. He's already losing it. He's completely losing it. I'm just giving you an example as to how this works astrologically. Chiron conjuncting Neptune. Chiron's even in conjunction with his sun. So what is he doing? He's like, you know, putting his foot in his mouth again and again and again. He's got the sun square to Jupiter, double down, double down, double down. You know, instead of saying, hey, you know, you're right, he goes into Mars Aries mode. I'm sorry, Mars Libra mode, and says, well, Liz Cheney was involved. That's such a Mars Libra thing. It's, it wasn't just the left. Let me balance this out. Liz Cheney was involved. You see, it wasn't just a left. You just said it was a fucking left-wing conspiracy. That's Neptune on his Mercury. He can't even remember what he said. Or if he did, he's going to be on that little slippery slope and go, hey, let me just flip it around a little bit and change a few things, and voila, prestidigitation. Aren't you impressed? And those guys weren't impressed, especially the dude on the left. The dude on the left, like, did something that most journalists never do. He asked a follow-up question. And Sam Harris was right there. So he's got Venus conjunct Algol too in his chart. That's interesting. And the Venus-Neptune opposition. So he's going to get into things at times that are going to be, you know, not all that. Venus and Taurus got that Pluto trine. Boy, that's really nice. He's got that sextile to Mercury. You know, that can be really good. He can sell you anything with a Mercury-Venus sextile. But that opposition to Neptune, every now and then, you know, the crashing waves of Neptune come down and erode the shores of Venus. And I think that's just what happened. Where's Mars now? It's in Gemini, right? So that happened. I think that happened right at the shoot, right at the Mars Gemini shoot, right? Mars 0 Gemini. That's exactly what happened. And that was opposite Vesta. So Vesta and Sagittarius at 0 degrees. You know, for me, Vesta is always like your wise self. It's the Vestal Virgin. It's the oldest of the asteroids. It's your wise self. It's your wise self, you know, flickering a light back from the end of your experience to remind you of who you are and what's important, right? To move towards that thing. So here in Sagittarius, it's publishing, some degree of religion, philosophy. Vesta's retrograde. So it's probably like, you know, revision some of that from time to time. But that's where Mars was. Mars was opposing Vesta. It's like, you kind of put your foot in your mouth, buddy. Super interesting. And what's even more interesting is how Google handled those search results. They're running cover for this guy. They're totally running cover for him. Here, let's tweak the algorithm. So that's Sam Harris's chart. It's, you know, he's got a grand trine when he's on, like the guy's on Mercury trine Jupiter. I'll tell you what he should do. Sam, I know you're not listening to this at all. You wouldn't listen to this show because you probably don't believe in astrology. But if you are, my advice to you is to get rid of the rational approach. Get rid of the rational approach. Stop trying to be the guy that figures everything out. Rely more on your intuition, the potential for psychic awareness. You could tell, man, when he was into MDMA, I bet you that guy was tripping balls with that Mercury Chiron conjunction, Mercury Neptune trine, Mercury trine Jupiter. I bet you he figured out the whole fucking universe when he was high in MDMA. You know, and the meditation stuff, I could see why he would meditate. I could tell he's again with the balsamic moon. It's like, all right, let go of the intellectual shit and just go with the spirituality and the meditation and just go there. Like, just get into that world. You get into that world, your life will work completely. And the other thing that I think, instead of trying to impose the vision of his will, which I think is Saturn and Aries, by the way, trying to help other people and they're feeling confused or they're feeling like things don't make sense. Right. If you can do, and you're not, and even back here, you're not going to get the kudos for it. Maybe he does. I don't know. I don't know the guy personally, but I would take a break from the media shit. Like, just fucking stop doing podcasts. And I would say, become a therapist. Like, just go be a therapist. Go do work with people, hours and hours of work, and listen and, study Jungian psychology and get into archetypal expression so you can have more free reign with your intuition. Get out of the head. The head's going to get you in trouble. And do not triple down, because you've already doubled down and you're going to lose even more people. So I wanted to use this as kind of an expose on Chiron, or not an expose on Chiron, but more of a exhumation of Chiron, or the extrapolation of Chiron and its effects on a chart. I wonder if this is going to have an issue with his marriage. Where's Juno in his chart? It's in Leo. Interesting. I'd have to see his wife. He'll be an issue with his mother. I can tell you that. I think she's still around. I think she's still alive. Anyway, there you go. Sam Harris, his chart, and the subsequent meltdown and relief. Like, there's a path for relief. Get out of your head and start helping people. Really work with the mentally ill. Let the spirit of the saints work through you. Okay, I wanted to talk about a very specific Chiron that was part of tonight's show plan. So when we get into Chiron, Chiron is behind me. I think Chiron is one of the most important elements in a chart, because with Chiron, what happens is that you are dealing with, most people know this, you're dealing with your wound, right? You're dealing with, rejection, shame, guilt, et cetera, that come along with the whole chirotic territory. And in order to become whole and individuated in a Jungian sense, you have to make friends with Chiron. Some people would say that Chiron is the shadow, and I would say that there's probably some truth to it. We got the shadow of Chiron behind me. So I think there's some truth to that. Now with Chiron, and I've said this with people, and I work with them in readings around this. You can find the time in your life where Chiron became an issue, and it is usually connected to the degree of Chiron. And that degree is the age where you had what we call the chirotic crisis. So when I work with it, I work with it from that degree. Let's say it's 22, right? I would look at 21 and 23, because we know Chiron goes retrograde. We know that there are conjunctions with Chiron. Chiron can be on a particular degree for a really long time. Like, Chiron can be on 1 degree for up to 4 months. So the age thing is important. So a little bit of latitude. So it'd be the degree before, the degree after that 1, 2, 3 degree latitude I'd say 9 times out of 10, you'll find where your crisis was. 9 times out of 10. Every now and then, it doesn't. It just, hey, it's life, right? Every now and then it doesn't work. It's the way it is. But 9 times out of 10 it does. So I think it's got about a 90%, well, 90% success rate, which would be 9 times out of 10. So 90% success rate. I've seen it. Where it gets really hard is when you get into 0 to 2. Because 0 to 2, you're dealing with birth issues, or you're dealing with, and I've talked about this before, like, for the most part, pre-language issues. But even then, if you ask questions, there are things that can happen. Oh yeah, my father left us when we were 1. Well, gee, that's going to affect you, right? I mean, because we think that babies are not really all that sentient, but all they do is giggle and shit and piss and laugh and, do all those things and sleep, cry. No, they're actually way more aware than we know, way more aware. So even though they may not remember a person, like that person's in their field, it's in their genetics. So when that person leaves, there's also the imprint that they left, the aftermath, what happens with the family afterwards. Let's say the mother remarries. So the person has a new father at 3 or 4, right? And they grow up with that father, and that father's an asshole. We'll just go down that path. Well, your chirotic crisis started before you even knew it. When your father left. So part of your key is to either, reconcile, go back to your father, find it, right? Or find that part of you when you were 1. And then like, okay, well, I'm dealing with abandonment issues that I can't even really verbalize. So you can go through the whole panoply of the ages, but it will end at 29. And I talked about this before. So I have Chiron at 28 Aquarius. When I was 28, I had a fucking chirotic crisis, right? I had a nervous breakdown and I didn't even know it. I mean, I did know it, but back then it was like, I was just going through like weird shit, stuff inside my head. And, did I have a nervous breakdown? Absolutely. I did. I was experiencing pressure that I couldn't really reconcile. And so that's what happened. And, I didn't even know it. I mean, I knew some astrology, but I didn't know about Chiron when I was 28 years old. Discovered in 1977. I don't think it became a real astrological force until many years later. And then we realized like the importance of Chiron on so many levels. So in how I work with astrology, Chiron is really important because it's an important part of my life. It was a teacher. I learned directly from that experience. And I learned directly from that experience and through the chirotic crisis, which was associated with my age, which was also the time of my Saturn return. I had a double whammy. So that was really interesting. The idea is that you are theoretically supposed to, heal from your chirotic crisis, right? That when you hit 50, you'll figure out how far down the line you are because that's when Chiron returns at 50. So if you haven't dealt with it, guess what? The phantasms or the phantoms of your chirotic crisis will reappear. They'll just look different. They'll reappear. So you get to, guess what? Deal with them again. And if you hadn't dealt with them before, you'll deal with them then. And then hopefully you put them to bed. And then after that, you have Chiron integrated. So it doesn't mean you have to wait to 50 to deal with Chiron. I mean, you can do it before 50, but you have to be aware of it. Some people do it and they're not even aware of it. Hats off to them. Good on them. But 50 is that place. So what happens with Chiron in general? Well, with Chiron, it's supposed to be theoretically between Saturn and Uranus, right? Saturn and Uranus, that's where Chiron is. Most people up to this point in time, and we've had a chirotic shift, by the way. I can tell you that right now, we have had a major, major chirotic shift. I think the chirotic shift happened in Pisces. That's what I think. I think that's when everything began to flip with Chiron, and I'll tell you why. So what do we know about Saturn, right? Saturn is you do the right thing, you marry the right person. Well, you go to the right college, you study the right field, you meet the right person, you get married to the right person, you buy the right house in the right subdivision, you get the right job at the right company, right? You marry into the right family, you join the social groups that will help advance you through life. You just do the Saturnian thing. Well, this is what the dominant paradigm does. This is what the dominant paradigm does. You want to get ahead in the dominant paradigm, that's what you do. However, on the other side of Chiron is Uranus. And Uranus, and I've talked about this before, Uranus says, hey, you're going to have to deal with the things that you've never dealt with. You're going to have to deal with things like chaos, temptation, creativity, right? That's how Uranus works. Saturn, order, Chiron, disruption. I'm sorry, Uranus, disruption. And Chiron is the arbiter between the two. So every now and then, if you are Saturn-centric, you're going to have to deal with Uranus. And a lot of people knew that, right? So what they would do is instead of going into the chaos or going into some degree of disorder, right? They won't do it. They won't do it. And I understand why. People don't want to disrupt their lives. They don't want to blow their lives up. That doesn't mean you have to with Uranus. Like, you don't really have to do it. You don't have to blow your life up. But if you don't do it, what will happen? You'll have to deal with Uranus eventually, usually, with the Uranus opposition, which happens in the late 30s, also known as the midlife crisis. You're going to have to deal with it anyway. So you may as well try to understand it and figure out how you can creatively work with the potential of Uranus. If you don't, you're going to have to deal with it as it relates to Chiron and Saturn and Uranus. Okay, so what do most people do? They go to the other side. So let's say you have, I've used this before. This is actually a pretty good example. So let's say you're a woman, you have Chiron and Aries. I've used this, I'll use it again. Most women with Chiron and Aries, when they're young, they're told to put a lid on it. Don't be so bossy. Don't tell people what to do. You're too much like a boy. You come back over here, right? That's how Chiron and Aries works for a woman. That's how it works for them. So what do? They'll generally listen to their parents and they'll figure out, okay, well, that's the Saturnian side. And I know that if I do the things that they're not telling me to do, which would be Uranian, I'm not going to get rewarded. I'm not going to want for Christmas, right? I may find somebody that doesn't want to love me or may not find anybody to love me. So then what happens? They go to the opposite sign. Oh, I'll be a Libra. I'll do the Libra thing. I'll fit in. I'll help. I'll be the person that is the mediator. And does that really work? No, it doesn't work. It may work for a while, but it doesn't work. So then what do you eventually have to do? You eventually have to deal with the Uranian side of Chiron, which is, fuck that. I don't care if people think I'm a bitch, or I don't care if people think I'm independent, or I don't care if people think that I'm bossy, or I don't care if people think that I'm strong. I'm just going to own it, right? That would be Chiron and Aries for a woman. And this happens through every single sign. For Chiron and Aries with men, that's a whole different trip. That could be like, be a fucking man. Come on, be a man. You can be a man. Be a man. Right. So they're like, okay, all right. I'll be a man. Are they really that, into it? Are they really that? Yeah, maybe not. If they're not into, where do they go? They go to the Libra side, which is, well, I'm just going to try and find balance here. I'm going to try and find some balance. Then ultimately, they have to hit the Uranian side. And yes, the challenge is to be a man, but to be a man on your own terms. Be a man on your own terms. Kind of like, Al Jolson's dad wanted him to be a rabbi. But Dad, I just want to sing the jazz. That was a Chiron and Aries moment for Al Jolson. I'm not going to be a cantor. I want to be a jazz singer, mammy. So that's how Chiron operates. I think it's important. All right, so here's my thesis. In 2011, Chiron went into Pisces, Fukushima. to me, that was literally let's say figuratively. We're going to go figuratively. Figuratively, that was a sea change in Chiron. What do I mean by that? Well, society at one point was very Saturnian. Go to the right school. America's a meritocracy. You put in the work and you put in the sweat equity, and guess what? You can experience the American dream. Gosh darn it, you can experience and guess what? In most cases, there was a version of that. There was a version of that. My parents did it. They lived it. My parents grew up with shit. My parents were so fucking poor when they grew up. And by the time they were in their 70s, you know, they had a nice place that they were living in El Dorado Hills where they wanted to retire. You know, my old man was driving around in a Porsche. I mean, he wasn't rich, you know, but they, you know, they had a boat at one point in time. So, you know, they were people who, you know, lived the American dream. They worked their asses off. They maxed out their credit cards and they lived the fucking American dream. That's what happened. It was Saturn. It was Saturn. My father did whatever he had to do. He was a warehouseman, belonged to the Teamsters Union. Right. My mother, you know, she got a job with the United States Navy. She wasn't commissioned in the Navy, but she worked for the civilian side of the Navy that was engaged in contracts and negotiations, and she worked her ass off. And by the time she retired, she had the same GS ranking. I think it's like a GS 12 or 13 or something. She was pretty far up there. And dudes with engineering degrees had the same GS rank as she did. So you could do that. That was the Saturnian thing to do, right? But where are we now with that? Saturn is not running the show anymore, right? We have flipped, and Chiron in Pisces did a sea change. We are Uranian dominant now. Uranian dominant. Hey, you want to be a freak? You want to identify as an African melon? Prickly on the outside and soft on the center? You can do that. You can be really anything you want, except, of course, a man and a woman, because those are just very, very arbitrary designations. How Uranian is that? How Uranian? Even corporations. Well, we're into equity now. Guess what we have? We have stakeholders. We don't have shareholders. We have stakeholders. And we're going to do everything in our power now to make sure that all of our stakeholders have equal representation. That's Uranus. Before it was Saturnian, which is, hey, we're all about the fucking profit. And we have shareholders. I want to make sure and I'm not here to like bang the drum for a corporation. That's not what I'm going to do. But that's what corporations did. They were Saturnian. Now they're Uranian. And it's like, you know, we don't care if we lose, 50 million this year. Who cares? As long as we get our ESG scores right, we'll be able to get all kinds of money. And then the carbon shit's going to come around and we'll just be loaded with carbon credits. We don't care about that other stuff. All that dollar stuff, we don't really care. We don't care about our shareholders. We got the stakeholders. How Uranian is that? That's how everything's become Uranian. But now you have people that are in full-fledged revolt. There's a full-fledged revolt in your schools, right? It's not like, they teach them the gay BCs in school. That's what's happening now, the gay BCs. That's Uranian. The ABCs were Saturnian. The gay BCs are Uranian. And that's what you get. So we did a sea change with Chiron. So now they're trying to usher in Uranus as the next planetary ruler that becomes the norm. Think about that for a minute. Now, if that's the case, and by the way, Uranus being the ruling planet of the new age through Aquarius, that's all part of it, right? So then what? Now you've got to think about, well, shit, I got to deal with Saturn at some point. This is what's happened. Because before, most people were Uranus resistant. Now they're Saturn resistant. And this is what's happened with Chiron. So what you have to do is you have to figure out where you are in that spectrum. And just keep in mind that a lot of the Uranian people, you're starting to see it now. I'll tell you where you're seeing it. You're seeing with people that have had gender reassignment surgery and they're regretting it. They went all out on the Uranian side. And now Saturn's kicking in and it's like, fuck, I have to deal with the consequences around the choices that I made and the technology that I accepted to alter my body, which has made my life, guess what? A prison, a cage. And that's at its worst, that's where Saturn is. So that's what we're having to deal with now. And people just want to go all in on Uranus, right? Oh yeah. Let's get the lady in red with the pencil mustache, who is the assistant director of nuclear waste in this country. Like how much more Uranian can you get? That's pretty fucking Uranian. But when you do that, then all of a sudden things shift. And then people have to come to a reckoning. What's interesting for me is I was totally Uranian growing up. When I lived in California, my chart was relocated. I had Uranus on my ascendant. I lived on my fucking Uranus land all my life. And guess what? I had a lot of fun. I had too much fun at times. I was very rebellious. I was always, trying to find a new thing, but not the new thing that society wanted you to find. But in my own way, I wanted to find the new thing. I was kind of reckless. Sometimes I got into wrecks. I was very disruptive. I was always disruptive. I was the disruptive kid in the class. I had parent-teacher conferences all the fucking time, right? So I lived Uranus. So at some point, I became a parent. Now what? I got to get more Saturnian. That's when my Saturnian stuff kicked in. So I have been gradually incorporating more Saturnian elements into my life. I quit drinking. I do my best to exercise on a regular basis. It doesn't get much more Saturnian than that. I do this work constantly, right? Because back then I was not constant in my work, but I was fine. It was fine. I did Uranian things, and they led me to this place. So that's where we are with Chiron right now. And Chiron, obviously in Aries, which we just talked about, is a big deal, right? Because we're really what we're looking at is, well, not only what is a woman, but what is a man, what is a human. I mean, all those chirotic things are coming into play. But at some point, the Saturnian side of this is going to hit. It's going to hit hard. And it's not going to be all fun and games at that point. It'll be like reality is set in. And, with Saturn, there's usually a reckoning. When's it going to happen? Maybe third decan Aries, possibly when it goes into that Sagittarian decan. It's almost there now. That's when the reckoning probably will come. So one of the Chirons that I wanted to talk about tonight is Chiron in Taurus. So let me give you a quick little field guide with Chiron in Taurus. A lot of Gen Xers, Chiron and Taurus. So Chiron and Taurus starts in 1976 and ends in 1984. So if you were born between 1976 and 1984, you have Chiron and Taurus in your chart. What does that mean? I think it's one of the hardest Chirons. I think Chiron in Aries has its challenges, but what you're attempting to do is find your individual voice and your individuality, right, and ultimately integrate power and will through the wounded parts of who you are. Taurus is more difficult, and this is my reasoning for Taurus being more difficult. because Taurus represents the most normal of things, your body, right? Your flesh and bone body in third dimensional space, right? What else? It's the earth. Taurus is the earth. It also represents some very basic functional things like touch, intimacy, all the things that we experience with Taurus in its finest, right? Oh yeah, I like being touched. I like nice fabrics on my body. I like these nice scents. They smell so good. You know, oh, this food is so delicious, and you know, everything in Taurus when it's really, you know, highlighted is sensual, right? Like you're connected to your body, you're connected to the world, you're connected to the senses, and it's all grounded and feels, when it's right, right? It's good. It's like you're happy to be here. Chiron and Taurus makes it difficult to be here. Most people with Chiron and Taurus that I have worked with have a very hard time being on this planet. Like, what the fuck is this place? How did I fucking get here? How did I get here? And how do I deal with it? I mean, that is the premise right there, right? That is the premise of Chiron and Taurus. What do I do? How do I feel like I belong? Right? It's challenging. Then you break it down into its segmented pieces. Well, what are you going to run into? You're going to run into things like food allergies with Chiron and Taurus. People who have Chiron and Taurus don't always digest food well. You'll run into things like not liking scents, like, ooh, overwhelming, too much, right? That's too much. I can't handle that. So you get a lot of sensitivities and a lot of allergies with Chiron and Taurus, which makes it harder to be here. The other thing you get with Chiron and Taurus can be difficulty with intimacy. That's a biggie, right? Like some people with Chiron and Taurus, they might like sex, but they may not like being touched. Like, you know, just give me a foot massage. That's it. I'm good, right? You can have that with Chiron and Taurus. It's a big part of it. And I have worked with a number of people who also have body issues with Chiron and Taurus. And these are people that work out. I mean, you look at their bodies, I'm like, guys, you got a great body here. Yeah, I don't like it very much. I've never felt comfortable in it. Well, it's hard for me to understand that, but really it's not, because I understand Chiron, because Saturn's going to predominate that. So what are you going to do? You're going to work at like fitting in. You're going to work at like it fitting in. It's really funny. You know, there's been this whole like fat revolution. I think that's really Uranus and Taurus. It's like, you know, and I didn't know this, but apparently there's like a fat hierarchy. There are so-called, and again, I'm not opposed to people who are overweight. I'm not. And even when it comes to like, you know, the ideal image of a woman, you know, I've always found like, you know, larger women to be attractive. It's never turned me off. So I'm not a person who's like that. Like, oh, wow. You know, you got a few extra pounds. So what? You look good. But it's gotten really weird now. Really, really weird, because there are some really, really overweight people and they're like up on this hierarchy. Like there are people who are not as heavy as those people. And they actually like have this thing called like fat privilege or weight privilege. I swear to God. So what we're seeing now is like this whole revolution with the body. You're seeing that with Taurus, right? It's like, you know, Lizzo's now a goddess, or it's weird. I don't think it's weird. I think it's unhealthy. That's the Virgo in me. I don't, because a lot of people who are severely overweight are reaping the benefits of like this hierarchy. You know, they have found their niche in a world of quote unquote body conscious people. They're like, I'm gonna make you really fucking conscious of my body, and they actually in a lot of ways, in their communities, they have clout because of how heavy they are. I kid you not. I shit you not. But with Chiron and Taurus, there is some of this, but it's more along the lines of, I'm not in my body, so I'm going to work out. I'm going to look good. You'll get that. You'll get that with the Saturnian expression. I've seen people with Chiron and Taurus deal with having a very normal life. I have one client, great guy, got a business, successful, got a wife, beautiful, smart, talented, kids, 3 of them, nice home, land. It's like he couldn't relate to his kids. He wanted to quit his job all the time. He just wanted to go completely Uranian because he'd set up the Saturnian side of it. Like, this is how it looks. I'm going to have a business. I'm going to get a wife. I'm going to have these kids because this is how I'm going to get through. He had no earth in his chart, by the way, except for Chiron and Taurus. Great guy. Very cool guy. I actually met him on a couple of occasions, which is, not uncommon, but not everybody is digital all the time. He became, third dimensional and a good dude. But unhappy, really unhappy. So then what happens? Instead of dealing with Chiron in that sign, where do they go? They go to Scorpio. If I can just find that one thing, and erase it out of me, I'll be fine. If I can just get down to that one thing, change that one thing, I'll be cleansed, I'll be healed, and I'll be able to be here. I've seen it. I've seen it so many times with Chiron and Taurus. The shadow. Let me get to the shadow. I'm going to get to the shadow. I'm going to fucking Clorox that shadow out of me. I'm going through all these modalities. There's this and this and this and this and this. And at the end of the day, guess what? They still got to deal with Chiron. So at some point, he would have to deal with the Uranian side of Chiron. Well, what do? You blow up your marriage? You blow up your 3 kids? You blow up your business? There's ways in which you can do certain things. My advice to him was that he had all these interesting ideas or interest in, alternative technologies. I said, well, fucking get into it, man. Get into these alternative, healing devices, like invest in them, buy them, learn them, open up a place where, you can do that and you can stick people on a biomat or whatever, right? Just keep going in that direction because, if you want to heal. And his business was in that world, but in the Saturnian side of things. I don't want to get into it too much. So there's a way that you can, but I don't want to do it. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to, I might have to sacrifice my income stream or, because I make decent money but then you're eternally unhappy because you're trying to figure this thing out. And this is what happens with people that have Chiron and Taurus. They want to get to the other side of it so they can go through it and spot out, right? You can't do it. You'll always get kicked back to Chiron. And you have to deal with either Saturn or Uranus. Pick your poison. So people with Chiron and Taurus, I think you are on a journey now with these nodes. The node going, hitting your Chiron. This is a time for you. And also Uranus. Like if you have, and you're born with Chiron and Taurus, coming or going, those nodes are going to cross your Chiron. And they're going to either it's going to radically transform you. Right. This is where you get to you deal with Uranus because it's in your Chiron sign. Right. And then the true node says, here you go. You have an opportunity here to reconcile part of what you're going through or what you went through at a certain age. So I think this is an interesting time because there's a lot of people born under Chiron and Taurus. And it's about incarnation and incarnating deeper and more into your body. So it's on the table for you. It's real. And a lot of people, again, you're going to be Gen Xers right up to 1984, where Gen X is, going to transition out, and you're going to get into Chiron and Gemini in 1985. So this is your time. This is your time to figure out how to be on the earth, how to keep 2 feet on the ground, how to have a relationship, how to have a marriage. You know, it's interesting. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think David has Chiron in Taurus. He's born in 1984. I'd have to go back and look. It might be Chiron in Gemini. I don't know when it changes. But, you know, I've been hearing from David, hey, you know, I want to have a kid. I want to be a father, right? That is a Chiron in Taurus moment. Even if he doesn't have Chiron in Taurus, that's a Chiron in Taurus moment. I want to have something that validates my incarnation. And what is that? The incarnation of a part of yourself, which is going to be a child, male or female. So this is, you know, I've been wanting to talk about Chiron and Taurus for a while. So remember, 1977 and 1984, if you're born during that time, you have Chiron and Taurus. And I think it's one of the more difficult Chirons to reconcile, because it's the body, it's the planet. But once you're here, once you do reconcile it, you'll be fine. And you'll be in your body, and you'll be in this place, and you'll still have to deal with the challenges of this place, but you won't feel like you're from another planet or another dimension. You'll actually say, I'm here, I'm going to make the best of it, and this is where I'm going to plant my flag. All right, let's get into Mars in Gemini. Is everybody ready for that? Mars in Gemini is going to be really interesting. And I felt it, man. I felt it really quickly on Friday. I really got into Mars in Gemini. Well, and I wasn't even really conscious of it. So one of the things that people have been talking about is Ann Hitch and the congresswoman from Ohio who got hit by a car. And Ann Hitch, of course, had her crazy car thing, which is still like this, like they haven't cleared the wreckage from that event yet. People are still poking around the wreckage, and more shit is showing up around it. It's very weird, very bizarre. So what is it? Jackie Worlowski, who is the congresswoman from Ohio. So the word on the street was that, and I talked about this on Fridays, that Jackie and Ann, got a little ditty about Jackie and Ann. They were working on some kind of a thing, documentary, whatever, on child trafficking, adrenochrome, yada, 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 yada. And again, that could be true. That could be true. I'm not saying it's not. But do we really know that that's true? We don't know. Do you have any emails? Are there emails? Hey, I'd like your help on this. Okay, I'd love to help you. Right? Do we have emails? I don't think so. Are there people that they interviewed? Maybe. Have they come forward? I don't think so. So I looked at this because this is like, wow, this is what they were working on. Right. So Mars and Gemini kicked in. It's like, really? Well, why don't we explore this? Like, really explore it. So let's flip it, right? Flip it. Because this is what we do with Gemini. We're going to flip it, play devil's advocate. So I got into it. And then I brought up, people like Paul Walker from Fast and Furious. And did Paul Walker, was he working on, because that was the rumor, he's working on something with trafficking. Well, what was he doing? Who was he working with? Did they interview anybody? Where are transcripts or anything that actually points to that? And I'm not saying he wasn't. And then, of course, you have that string of celebrities like Chester Bennington, who does look a hell of a lot like Podesta. He looks so much like Podesta, John Podesta. It's freaky. I could see Chester Bennington being John Podesta's kid. I don't have a problem with that. And John Podesta is just a freaky freak show anyway. And Chris Cornell, they were both supposed to be working on a lot of the child trafficking stuff and all these other things, right, that are related to it. And then you had, who else? There was DJ Avicii. And they're all dead. So I thought to myself, well, if all these people were working on this thing, then you would think that there would be some trace of it. Where are the traces of it? Do we have the outline of a script? Do we have interviews, transcripts? Do we have emails where they're talking about it and people are agreeing to? I don't think I've been doing this for a very long time. I've been going down rabbit holes a long time. And with those people, I've gone down rabbit holes. And in all those cases, and maybe I missed a few stones, I'm not perfect. I never saw anything except relationships that if you link certain people together, there's a good chance that that's the case. But you have to admit, you'd have to make some of those links. Like Chester Bennington looking like John Podesta. They look alike, right? Maybe that's where he's going with Chris Cornell. You know, who does it? Sasha Stone. Like the relationship with Sasha Stone and this guy that is always around Sasha Stone and vice versa, who's connected to one of the the Black families of Venice and all the weird shit that goes on through that. So, you can see these things, and Chris Cornell's wife and his associations with this person who hangs out again with this guy who's connected to the Black families of Venice. There are a lot of connections that are there. You can see them. You can connect the dots. But then when you look for like the actual evidence, it's not always there. So that was part of my Mars and Gemini thing. It's like, okay, again, I'm not saying it's not true. But in all the times that I've been doing, the only time I've ever seen anything that even remotely resembles that was when Corey Feldman did his fundraiser to do his documentary on, sex and child trafficking in Hollywood. And it was a big nothing. It was basically everything he'd already said before, just committed to a long player. That's it. You would get more out of watching the two Coreys than you would out of watching the documentary that I think he got $80,000 from to do, or whatever that was on GoFundMe, right? But that's the only one we know of. All these other people. So that was a Mars and Gemini moment for me. I was like, wow. I just blasted through this, this 6-tweet thread on Twitter, and that's exactly what I was doing. I said, oh, I guess Mars and Gemini is here. So Mars and Gemini is fast. Mars and Taurus, not so fast. Mars and Gemini, fast. Until we get to Mars retrograde, and maybe not so fast. Maybe just equally as fast, but reverse. And by the way, don't be afraid of Mars retrograde in Gemini. Because, first of all, people know that Mars and Gemini is going to it could get really fucking weird. Like the precursor of Mars and Gemini was Anne H. and all the double stuff and all the twinning stuff. And I got into that big time last Sunday night, my Friday show with Noreen, which, by the way, people loved that show. I think we got like 80 comments on that. That show I did with Noreen had more comments than any show that I've done. And that includes my shows with David. It's like, wow, that was interesting. And it's the subject matter. So we could see, even with Anne H., like we could see that Mars and Gemini was coming, like violence, car crash. She had a Mercury-Mars opposition in her chart, which we looked at. Mercury and Gemini. Mars and Sagittarius both were retrograde, if I'm not mistaken. So Mars and Gemini is fast, and it is restless and aggressive. It can be innovative. That's the other thing. And I'm going to show you the innovation and the restlessness of Mars and Gemini. To me, Mars and Gemini is like a shark. And sharks have to constantly keep moving. Right? Sharks can't sit still for a while. They may sit still for a little bit, but sharks always move. They need that sea water and that circulation constantly going, into their face and into their mouth and into their gills. They need that. That's like their life force, right? And people who have Mars and Gemini need that too. They always move. They keep moving. And if people that have Mars and Gemini stay sedentary for too long, they'll get really sluggish, really, really sluggish. So if you have Mars and Gemini in your chart, you're supposed to rest, but don't rest for long periods of time. You know, people of Mars and Gemini need to learn how to cat nap. That would be, if you have Mars and Gemini or Mars in the third house, learn how to cat nap. Cat nap it up, right? Rest a little bit. You know, maybe you take 2 or 3 naps during the day. You know, your naps are anywhere between 1 to 2 hours. And then when you go to bed, you could do that. I mean, it's not impossible. And when you go to bed, you can sleep for 5 hours. Like chop up your 8 hours of sleep. That's how I would do Mars and Gemini. I don't have Mars and Gemini, so, but if I did, that's what I would do. Mars and Gemini is interesting. It's going to be a very interesting, I mean, even with somebody like Sam Harris, hello, Mars and Gemini, right? Mars, your ruling planet, Gemini, you're going to have to deal with the ramifications of how you have been dominating discourse and being, you know, so logical and right about everything. Here comes Mars and Gemini. It's like, what did he do? He was on a show with 2 people, right? Not 1, but 2, right there. Gemini. Those 2 was 1. And that one guy just asked him some questions, and where did he go? He started circling the drain. So Mars and Gemini will be interesting. And it is restlessly innovative. So wherever it's going to show up in your house or your chart, you're going to have to figure out, like, you're going to have to be active, like really be active and figure out how you're going to be active. Because if you don't use Mars, Mars will use you. That is the nature of Mars. This is what I tell people to have Mars in the 7th house. If you're not working with your partner, if you're not active with your partner, you don't have a good sex life with your partner, and you got Mars in your 7th house, guess what's going to happen? It's going to turn into arguments, and you're going to bicker, and you're going to fight, and there's going to be tension. So you may as well figure out how we can do this together so you can keep that tension at a minimum. And it's a confrontational planet in a house where you're supposed to be getting along with people. It's not a death knell, but that's what happens with Mars. If you don't use it, you're going to get into arguments. You're going to fight. You're going to bicker. People are going to be aggressive with you. So it's good to have a partnership and an active partnership, whether it's having to work together, working out together, having a sex life together. With Mars in the 7th house, you better have an active sex life. Because if you don't, you're going to get pissed. You're going to turn that energy inward, right? This is the way it is. So you're also going to have to deal with people who are strong personalities. You're going to need that with Mars over there. So that can, you know, that's a whole other different discussion, right? Because you can be very accommodating. Well, let's say you're a Libra rising and you have Mars and Aries in the 7th house. Well, people will see you as accommodating. With Libra, you get over to the house of partnership, and all of a sudden you're a whole different animal over there, right? And the people you're going to attract are going to be very different too. That's this 1st house, 7th house axis. So wherever Mars shows up, you have to figure out how Mars is your ally. Like, you got to use Mars. That's important, very important. Or else, guess what? It becomes problematic. And it will turn against you. It will invert, and then you'll deal with the conflict of you not having a handle on Mars. So you just got to find where Gemini is in your chart, and when you just see it, right? 1st house, you're going to be assertive. 2nd house, you're going to work hard, and guess what? You'll spend hard too. Whenever I have Mars transiting my 2nd house, I work hard and I spend hard. Mars in your 3rd house, which is like Gemini, it's restless. You know, it's a good time to go down to your city hall and, you know, chew some ass out, or, you know, city council and chew some ass out with Mars and Gemini. You can get into contentious struggles with siblings during a Mars 3rd house transit. However, if you want to, you can also, look who's back. Yeah. You hear me talking about Mars. Yeah. You know, or you could do things with, you could like flesh things out with a sibling. Hey, you know, you've been sitting on some conflict for a while. Let's get it out. Let's get it out in the open. Let's deal with it. Mars in the 3rd house also can be very accident prone. So be careful. Be careful. That means you would be literally an Aries rising if you have Mars and Gemini and transiting through your 3rd house. Mars in the fourth house, it's conflict at home. If you got a transiting through your fourth house, you may be thinking about moving with a Mars transit or your fourth house with Mars and Gemini, or maybe getting a second home, or maybe even looking at, mobile living, van life, or something along those lines. What you don't want to do is you don't want to get into conflict with people that you're living with. Home renovations can be really good with Mars in the fourth house. That can be an excellent time to look at what's going on with your home and making sure that you are can do some things to keep it up to speed. Mars in the fifth house, transiting Mars in the fifth house, you could have some conflict with your kids with Mars in the fifth. It's better if you can do things with them. Your love life could pick up with Mars in the fifth. You can get very romantic. You can invest in a hobby, right? Like, I really love this thing. I'm going to try it, especially in Gemini. You've been doing all these other things for work. Well, let me try this. I'll put this hat on. Mars in the sixth house, pay attention to your health. It could be a good time for you to look at, another way of approaching your health. You've been doing one thing for a while, flip it up, change it up, right? If you've been doing strength training, get into, elasticity and being limber, right? Or, looking at your diet. What kind of diet do you have? If you've been a particular, let's say you've been a vegan for a long time, you may want to try out some animal protein or some vitamin D or whatever, right? So you're aggressively going to go after something with Mars there. Seventh house, partnership and relationship. You're going to take the lead in it, or you're going to figure out how to do more things with your partner. I just talked about that. Gemini can be a little bit argumentative. Make sure you're on the same page. Mars in the eighth house, you can face your fears. That's Mars and Gemini. Eighth house facing. It's also, I think, Mars transit the eighth house of Gemini can be a little kinky. That could be a little kinky. Mars, because Mars and Gemini in general, I think, is a little kinky. Mars in the third house, whatever sign it's in, little kinky. I remember, who was it? Was it Tiger Woods? I think Tiger Woods has Mars in the third house. When you look at like what Tiger Woods is into, Tiger Woods, for a period of time, was a little kinky there, right? The kink got Tiger in some deep trouble. So wherever Mars goes, right, you've got to work with that energy. Mars in the ninth house is restlessness and, like, fuck, I want to go see the world. I'm tired of being locked down. I want to take on some of these institutions that think they know what's up, what the truth is, right? Mars in the 10th house. It's like, okay, what's a better path for me with my career? Can I do something different? Can I double task, right? Because if you have Gemini in your midheaven, you're good at multitasking and wearing more than one hat. And Mars up there is like, okay, do two things at once. Get ready to make a pivot if you can, right? It can be contentious at work though, too. Because you may have answers to things that other people don't want to hear. And you could get into conflict there. Mars in the 11th house is always related to conflict with friends, right? Friends or groups. You may want to find a group that allows you to be more Mars-like. If you've been hanging out with a bunch of pacifists, maybe Mars in your 11th house takes you down to the gun club and the shooting range, or, you join the boxing club or something like that with Mars in the 11th house. You go find out the other thing that you haven't done because it's Mars in Gemini. Mars in the 12th house, one of the more difficult Marses, because it's usually, like the hidden enemy. Mars in the 6th house, the enemy's out there in front. You can kind of see them. So if you're Taurus, Cancer rising, and you're going to have Mars going through your 12th house for this long period of time, that's tricky because you're Cancer rising anyway, and you're going to be sensitive to the environment around you. And that Mars transit can kick up a lot of, like if it was on the ocean floor, like a deep sea storm or something like that, just kicking up all this sediment. So if you're Cancer rising, I would say, take time out if you can and find a way to be creative and focus on creative and artistic projects, especially with the Mars retrograde. You might you might resurrect like a creative potential that you had at one time. And Mars retrograde happens on the 31st of October. So there's your, the wheel with Mars. it's going to be a really interesting time. Mars in Taurus is okay. I find it to be really slow, sluggish. You can get some momentum with Mars in Taurus, but now things happen. They happen lightning fast. You know, for everybody listening, like watch your driving with Mars and Gemini, especially during the retrograde phase. Just watch your driving. People are restless. People are in a hurry, right? They're not paying attention. You know, they're on their fucking cell phones, communication. Just keep your eyes on the road and the hand on the wheel with Mars and Gemini. It's going to be in Gemini for a while. I think till end of January of next year. Okay, so I want to give you an example of Mars and Gemini, and then what we're probably going to do is probably going to end this on Trump's chart and the impact of Mars and Gemini on Trump's chart. So let me do something a little. I'm going to go into the world of sports, since I know everybody loves sports. So when I was growing up in California, of course, I love most of the California teams, Bay Area teams. The only Bay Area team I never really loved was the Giants. I never really loved the Giants. I always rooted for them because they were a local team. But on the hierarchy of Bay Area sports, I would say the Giants are probably below the San Jose Sharks. My favorite Bay Area team probably would be 1-2, very close. The Oakland A's and the San Francisco 49ers. It wasn't always that way. I didn't really like the 49ers for a while until Bill Walsh showed up. And Bill Walsh was such a badass. And I love what they did with the franchise organization. He was so fucking smart. It was great. Of course, they won, which is always helpful. And it was the best time to be in California. The 80s were the fucking best time to be in California. I shit you not. It was great. It was before Silicon Valley became, the land of fruits and cucks. And, but you still had some money there. HP was there. So you had HP money that was floating around, kind of a big deal. Hewlett Packard in the Bay Area was a really big deal for a long time. Everybody wanted to work for HP because of their management style, their group activities. They were always doing things for their employees. So that was a big deal. So A's, Niners, right? And then right below them would be, I was a Raider fan, but then they left. And then when they came back, I didn't like them as much because I'd moved on to the Niners. And I thought Al Davis was a piece of shit, actually. I liked him more before, a lot less later. So I'd probably put the Warriors above the Raiders, then the Raiders, then the San Jose Sharks, then the San Jose Earthquakes, and then the Giants. I didn't like, if the Giants were in the World Series, I'd watch them and root for them. I wouldn't root for the other team. My very first baseball game was the Giants. There was a period where the Golden State Warriors had a coach by the name of Don Nelson. And Don Nelson is a very interesting character for a lot of different reasons. But one of the more interesting reasons that one of the reasons why Don Nelson was interesting as a basketball coach and as an innovator is because he came up with something called small ball. And really what it was is that in basketball, you had a center who was big, right? You had a power forward who was big, but not as big as the center, usually bulky, kind of your muscle guy. If he could shoot a little bit, that'd be great. You had a small forward who was generally pretty agile, and he was a guy that could drive to the basket, but mostly known for his outside shooting, get some rebounds. Point guard, who controlled the ball, passed dish, scored a little bit. And then the shooting guard, who was usually the guy that could dribble a little bit, pass a little bit, but really his job was to score. Right? Shoot from the outside and occasionally drive from the hoop. So Don Nelson did something that nobody else had done in the NBA. And it was because he kept saying that he never had a center. He never had a center. So what he did is he would play a bunch of small guys. When I say small, we're talking relatively small. Like the smallest guy would be maybe Tim Hardaway at 5'11". And then the tallest guy might be maybe Tyrone Hill, who played forward. And I think Tyrone Hill might have been 6'7". So it was called small ball. And then what would happen is that you would have these coaches who would keep their big lineups out there, and their small lineups would just kill them. They'd run them up and down the court. They'd force their big man to come out and shoot, right? So it caused a lot of problems for teams. And then what would happen is that the other team's small guys weren't as good as Nelson's small guys. So Nelson's small guys would always dominate. So they were really, really good during the regular season. And then they would get to the NBA playoffs and they would call the games differently. In the NBA playoffs, they'd let players play, which means you could foul, right? So his small teams they didn't do well in the playoffs because they always had to play teams that were bigger. And it was like, okay, we're gonna let the refs muscle your guys around and you're not gonna be able to do anything. So they never really would make it to the NBA finals very often. So let me show you, Donnell. Let me show you this thing, right? Don Nelson was right about the future of basketball. On We Believe Night, we remember Oracle Arena, Don Nelson's genius and the most lovable misfit gang there ever was. Don Nelson has the most wins of any coach in NBA history, but he never won a championship or even made the NBA finals. By the way, I think that's astrological. Well, I'll get into that. He won head coach of the year 3 times, but none of his teams left a significant mark on the competitive history of the NBA. A mad scientist, Nelly was always bucking convention, trying out strategies that other coaches wouldn't dare to do. For the most part, his experiments didn't allow his teams to approach the elite echelon of basketball dynasties during his time. Nelson was obsessed with 2 concepts. Foremost, the point forward and small ball. Both strategies put smaller players in positions to score points in a hurry and use their quickness and shooting ability to overwhelm traditional defenses. The cost was a defensive system that gave up a lot of height, size, and rebounds. Ultimately, Nelson believed against basketball convention that the offensive explosion of Nelly ball would overcome its offensive deficiencies. When Nelson was the coach of the Warriors during the Run TMC era, he would split playmaking responsibilities among Tim Hardaway, Mitch Richmond, and Chris Mullin. Whereas most teams would begin their offensive sets with their point guard almost exclusively, he opted for lineups with 3 guards and 2 forwards without a traditional center to increase the pace and add shooting. When he was coach of the Mavericks in the early 2000s, he put Dirk Nowitzki at center alongside Steve Nash and Michael Finley in an effort to have 5 shooters on the floor at all times. When Don Nelson became coach of the Warriors again in 2006, the team hadn't made the playoffs in over a decade. And Baron Davis and Jason Richardson, he had 2 big guards who could pile on the points. Recent draftees Monte Ellis and Andres Biedrins fit the Nelly ball as well. Monte was a small guard with incredible handles and bursts, while Andres was one of the quickest centers in the league. He couldn't shoot a lick. But still, the team wasn't good. Midway through the season, the team acquired forward Steven Jackson and Al Harrington. Perhaps the greatest trade in recent Warriors history, both Jackson and Harrington were physical enough to survive as centers in the small ball lineups, and Jackson especially could create for his teammates and handle the ball. The mashup of misfits shouldn't have worked. They were all too small to defend and too brazen to come together. But as we all know, they pushed their way into the playoffs, became one of the first 8 seed to knock off a 1 seed in a 7-game series. They confounded MVP Dirk Nowitzki with their physical play, ran circles around the Mavericks defense and shocked the basketball. I was at game. I believe they beat them in 6 games. If I'm not mistaken, it was either the 6th game of this. I was at the final game at the Coliseum. I was there when they beat the Mavericks. It was to this moment, and I've been to some great sporting events. It was probably number 1. Actually, no, I'll put it number 2 behind when the A's clinched the regular season against the Texas Rangers. And I took my kid out of school to take him to the game. That's number 1. That is the number 1 event. This would have been number 2. So Nelson was right about so much. He knew that small ball could work. The greatest teams of the past couple of years have changed their center position forever. The Heat began it by moving Chris Paul. Okay, so I'm just trying to tell you, give you an idea as to what happened and how Don Nelson changed basketball, right? He changed back. He was restless in his determination to find an advantage and to find a win, a way to win. Well, his name is Nelly. Let's look at Nelly's chart. That's what they called him. What's he got? He's got Mars in Gemini, 29 degrees, anaretic degree Mars. And what's Mars doing? It's sextiling Jupiter, sextiling Saturn, right? So Mars is doing some, actually, sextile Jupiter, quintile his sun. So he's got some genius there. Square to Neptune. I'll get into the Neptune square with his Mars in a second. But you can see it, right? The restless, innovative energy of Don Nelson helped him create this idea of small ball, but he was always restless. He was always trying to find new combinations. Like Mitch Richmond was such a good fucking player. And then he said, okay, we're gonna make this even better. We're gonna get Billy Owens, and we're gonna draft Billy Owens, and we're gonna trade for Billy Owens. And Billy Owens was like a 6'9", like guy who could do it all. But the thing with Billy is Billy was lazy, gifted but lazy, and the trade backfired on him. And eventually they wound up, I think, trading Billy Owens. He also drafted Chris Webber, but they only gave Chris Webber like this 1-year deal because of the salary cap, and it's like, okay, you play 1 year, and then we'll renegotiate. Not a big deal, right? That is his Mars square to Neptune. Neptune being the ruler of Pisces, right? He like, okay, well, it'll be fine. What happened? Well, Weber bolted. He left town, and he's like, fuck you. I'm gonna do this. So what they did is I wound up trading him for Tom Gugliotta. So, but what I'm trying to show though is this Mars in Gemini. Don Nelson did something that was so innovative. He changed. He flipped everything. Right. He looked at it, said, okay, this is the way it's done. Let me go to the other side here and let's do something different. And today, the NBA has evolved along these lines so that Nelson was an innovator. Look where his son Uranus is. He's innovative. He's got a Mercury conjunction with Uranus. Innovative. He's also become a pot grower. I shit you not. He's friends with Willie Nelson, and he's in the pot business in Hawaii. So he's getting the most out of that Sun, Mercury, Uranus trine with Neptune. But as a coach, that Mars-Neptune trine did not serve him well. Because the other side of the restless version of Don Nelson is that because he was hard to work with at times, he would get fired. He would get fired, but he would always get fired with like 2 or 3 years left on his contract. So he's always getting paid. Like he went from the Bucks. I think he had a slight ownership stake in the Warriors, if I'm not mistaken, when Fitzgerald and Finane owned the Warriors, and then they fired him because everything backfired. Everything backfired from Chris Webber to, even the small ball stuff, to trading Mitch Richmond. So where does he go? He goes to the New York Knicks. He does really, really well for the Knicks, and guess what? He gets fired. Where does he go after that? He goes to the Mavericks. He does really, really well for the Mavericks, but guess what happens? He gets fired. It got so bad with the Mavericks. I remember that his son, and he and his son did not always get along. I don't know what their relationship was like now. But I remember watching Don Nelson during a playoff game. He had been coach of the team. He had to watch the playoff game from where the players entered from the locker room. It was like he couldn't be on the bench. It was weird. It was really weird. And he had to watch his son coach the team. And his son, Don with another N, was coaching the team. And they didn't get along. Like they did not really get along. In fact, to this day, I think his son holds a grudge against him. Then he comes back to the Warriors. And who brings him back? Chris Mullin. Right? Chris Mullin brings him back because Chris Mullin played for him. Chris Mullin was the GM of the Warriors. Let's bring Don Nelson. Don Nelson was on the coaching scrap heap. Brings him back, and what does he do? He does his magic again. What does he do to Chris Mullin? He throws him under the bus. Why? So he can become general manager. I swear to God, that's what happened. And to this day, Chris Mullin has forgiven him. Right? It's not, but he threw him under the bus. in a reorg, Don Nelson, Mars-Neptune square, right? That anaretic Mars at 29 Gemini is destructive and restless in its own, like its own expression. But I remember when I first started to get into astrology and I started to look at Mars and Gemini, and I had this instinct, like, what the fuck is going on with Don Nelson? Like, why is this guy so smart, but also and innovative, but also self-destructive and restless? He was always like, swapping his players around and couldn't draft. Sometimes he could draft well. Other times he couldn't draft for shit. I will say this. The last great thing that Don Nelson ever did for the Warriors was to draft Steph Curry. He drafted Steph Curry. And in typical Mars and Gemini fashion, he was supposed to trade Steph Curry to, guess what? The Phoenix Suns. He was supposed to trade him there. And what did he do? He reneged on it. Like, no, sorry, we're not making that deal. We're good. Thanks. The Suns were furious. But there was nothing they could do. They had no written contract or anything, right? No written contract. So at the end of the day, Nelly changed the game of basketball. He changed it. Now he's a pot dealer and friends with Willie Nelson. But I remember thinking about him, thinking, wow, this guy is really, really restless. And I was getting deep into astrology at that time. This was like the late 2000s. And I saw that Mars and Gemini, I knew it. I knew it. That's it to a T. And even getting fired, right? Like not finishing the job. That's Mars at the anaretic degree in Gemini. His wife was named Miss Joy. He was referred to as Miss. I always thought that was interesting. Miss Joy. Don Nelson. He's still around. He's a giant. That is a lesson in Mars and Gemini. So speaking of Mars and Gemini, we got one more chart to look at tonight. Got a good solid 3-hour show here. Started on time. All you mods back east, you get a good night's sleep. I'm turning a new page with Mars and Gemini. Okay, I don't want that. What do I want? I don't want that. That's what I want. I want this page. Who are we going to look at? We're going to look at Donald Trump. We're going to look at the Trumpster. What's a Sunday night without looking at Trump's chart? I think I've looked at Trump's chart more than any other chart. And there are times where I honestly don't want to look at Trump's chart. Like, enough. Can we look at somebody else's chart? Maybe I'll do, I think I've done DeSantis before. Maybe I'll do DeSantis next week. Maybe I'll do DeSantis next week. Just to keep it even, right? And by the way, I'm not here to, pom-pom for Ron DeSantis. I'm not here to pom-pom for Ron. Okay, let's see what we got. Okay. Now, somebody on Twitter had asked me if I was going to, I guess somebody said that Trump shouldn't run for president. And I did not look at that chart. I just realized the two Dons tonight. We got two Dons tonight. Don Nelson and Donald Trump. Little Gemini action. Okay. We got Virgo, right? We're headed into Virgo too. Should I do another hour on Virgo? I don't think so. We'll do Virgo next week. So back when Trump was running for president in his second term. We'll go back to 2019. In 2019, Trump was going through the Saturn opposition. So he has Saturn in Cancer. And in 2019, Saturn was down here. He was 74 years old, right? Actually, he was 74 in 2018, but still going through the Saturn opposition. So it would be 75 because he has a late Saturn at 23 degrees. So he's going through the Saturn opposition at 75. Now, and again, we've talked about this before. There is a cycle to the Saturn opposition. First Saturn opposition happens at 14. What happens? The endocrine system kicks in. You separate out from your dominant culture, i.e., generally your family, most often your father, right? Because that's Saturn, and it's like, I'm going to listen to rock and roll or heavy metal or hip hop, or if your father's really into rock and roll and hard music at 14, I'm going to listen to K-pop. That might be the most subversive thing a 14-year-old could do. If your parents are into, I don't know, Bruce Springsteen, Bob Seger, Bon Jovi, whatever, right? Or even something harder. Like, let's say every now and then your dad likes to kick out the Pantera jams. Like the most radical thing you do would be listening to K-pop. Anyway, that's what happens. Saturn opposition, 14. You begin to define yourself apart from your family and the dominant culture that you grew up in. What happens 30 years later at 44? You've generally hit the glass ceiling, and then you need to do something different in order to remake yourself. And men go through it and women go through it. There are different versions. Sometimes they're the same. I became a father for the first time at 44. I stepped away from .com world. It was a major, major transition and shock, but you have to do something different. And I sure did. And eventually led me to this. At 74, or in this case with Trump at 75, you got to do the same thing. And I remember having shows where I was looking at his chart. I'm like, I was trying to work out the algorithms of a second Trump presidency. Some people say, well, he's still president. Okay, well, maybe that's the case. Maybe that's the case. Clearly, the 2020 election, you know how I feel about it. I don't have to go public with it, but you can intuit and infer how I feel about it. That's called a dog whistle, by the way. But I was looking at the algorithms for Trump being reelected. And at that time, he had his notable return, which is almost always a shoo-in. The problem with what was going on with Trump during that time, besides the fact that he was having his notable return, and yeah, was it a shoo-in? Well, you be the judge. And I predicted that he was going to win, and I don't think I was wrong. I don't think I was wrong. However, that said, he also, prior to the election, he had an eclipse on his moon, a solar eclipse on his moon. That was not good, right? Is that right? Was the lunar eclipse? Yeah, no, he had a lunar eclipse. And he's born on a lunar eclipse. I'm like, ugh, not great. I did not get a good vibe out of that eclipse. But the other thing that really got my attention was the Saturn opposition. Now, Pluto also was in there too. You can see Pluto down here, the Pluto opposition right there, right? But I was really looking at the Saturn opposition. And that was at 74. What do you think happens at 74? You fucking retire. And I'm like, this is problematic for Trump because he's got this nodal return, and this thing kind of looks pegged with that. But then I said to myself, oh, all right. Well, if he's going to have a Saturn opposition, And then Saturn is going to go into Aquarius and into his sixth house. He'd have to be a different kind of president. That was the only way that I could rationalize the Saturn opposition at that time, knowing that he had to do something different. Well, he spent the last 2 years doing something different. We know that. The other thing was that Saturn in the sixth house. That's a health house. And boy, did we see that happen for him in 2021. That was not the best look for him in 2021. I can tell you that right now. That was a pretty bad look, actually. So now he's got Saturn still in his sixth house. And it's trining his sun. It's retrograde, but it will come back and trine his sun. And Saturn's rising in Trump's chart. It's rising. He's going to have to go through that seventh house, Saturn transit in Pisces. That could be tricky, right? I mean, that could be a tricky transit. Pisces rules things like prisons, sanitariums, hospitals, jails. Could Trump go to jail with a Saturn transit through the seventh house? It's quite possible. Could he get clear on some of the vampiric relationships that he's had in his life and surround himself with? Maybe. Possible. But I felt like the Saturn opposition was not a great transit for Trump. Period. End of story. And I've said this before. I think Trump should have run for president a long time before 2016. If Trump had run for president in 2004, hell, even in 2000, if he had run, could he have beaten George Bush? He would have had to have been a Republican, but Trump was a Democrat at that time. Al Gore was almost a shoo-in. He was a shoo-in, right? I mean, even though Clinton was a train wreck, he was still popular enough with the Democrats that they just looked at Gore as being, the most prominent successor in that Clinton-Gore machine. I think Trump, if he could have run in 2004, he as a Democrat, by the way, because who do the fucking Democrats run? John Kerry, Skull and Bones member. Trump needed to run earlier. He needed to run earlier. If he could have done that, let's say it was 2000, Saturn was in Gemini, right? And I talked about this before. He could have had basically a 4-year run from here to here, and then another 4-year run. We could have had 8 years theoretically of Trump. And by the time it got to Saturn in Leo, which was 2008 roughly, right? 2008. So 2000, 2004, right? Saturn 12th house, he exits the stage. He exits the stage, and then 3 years later, it hits his ascendant, and he has something new, right? He does something completely new. Instead, what did he do during that time? I think he got into The Apprentice during that time, which is very Leo-like. Put Saturn in his first house. The rehabilitation of Trump's image was The Apprentice. I think he should have run for president earlier. He could have had, and even as a Democrat, right? Did he have the tools? Did he have the wherewithal, the know-it-all? Yeah, of course he did. He was pro-American. He's always been pro-American. Go back and watch his videos. Again, I am not here to bang Trump's drum. You go back and watch his videos with people like Larry King, where he talks about America's getting fucked over, right? He ain't lying. He's telling the truth. It's clear that he thinks the country's getting a raw deal. He's taking out full-page ads. I mean, who does this, right? Is all part of to program it if Donald Trump were president? I don't know. Maybe. But that's when he should have ran. So the opposition to me is like, all right, you're going to have to do something different. But generally, that's when you retire. That is when you retire. Period. Could he have cracked Obama's second term instead of Mittens? Maybe. I don't know. Obama was so popular. I don't think he could have beaten. He certainly couldn't have beaten first term Obama. Maybe second term Obama, he might have beaten him. Maybe. Because there were people that were getting off the Obama train in that second term. So I think if I were Trump, I would have probably run against Al Gore in the Democratic primaries and then taken on Bush. I bet he could have beaten Bush. All right. So what does that mean now? Well, he's got Pluto retrograding. It doesn't quite go to Saturn, but he's already gone through Pluto-Saturn retrograde. Not good. Difficult, intense, right? Pluto is, fucking with his legacy. He's got some saying it too, right? Mr. Vaccine cheerleader. That's a Pluto-Saturn opposition. People are like, what? What are you talking about? Pluto will hit and go back on. It will oppose Venus. That'll be interesting to watch. Like, are people like his business manager or the guy who they just arrested last week, Mike Pence, Jared Kushner, are people that he considered his allies going to turn on him with a Pluto-Venus opposition? That's quite possible. That's very, very possible. You're also going to witness Mars go right there, right? So Mars is going to wind up conjuncting Uranus, his true node, his sun, and that's going to be very interesting. Very, very interesting. Are we going to witness Trump rising again? Look where the moon is tonight. 29 Gemini. Right off of 7 degrees off his sun. Excuse me. Had a little burp there. So we know that Trump is always in conflict. That's Mars. He's got Mars in his ascendant. He's fucking always going to be in conflict. Always. That's the nature of Trump. Whether he's in conflict or people are in conflict with him, it doesn't really matter. That's how Mars rolls. The retrograde with Mars is what I am concerned about with Trump. Just in general. Let me just see. Let me go up to, right. So the retrograde happens on the 31st of October, Halloween. And it goes, let's see. So Mars is at 25. So it goes retrograde 3 degrees off of his sun and crosses his sun again. I think that's a challenging time for Trump. And somebody like, oh, good. That fucker gets challenged right into the Fed penitentiary, that is. So 11/19, Mars hits 22 degrees on 11/19. Let's get back to his chart. I'll show you. No, not Don Nelson, Don Trump. Right there, right? So November 19th, 25 degrees, retrograde. This one hits the sun, 22. Now, Mars goes pretty far back. It goes retrograde all the way into 2023. Doesn't go into Taurus. It goes to 8 degrees. It goes direct on January 14th. So it would put Mars in Trump's chart right. That's 5 right there. Right there. So we're pretty close. We're pretty close to that now. Mars is at 0 Gemini. Oh, yeah. Right there. So keep an eye on, we'll check in on this. Well, when would that be? Here. Because that's going to be an interesting time for his chart in general. Okay. So it's going to go to 8 degrees. September 4th. So September 4th and then January 14th. At least in Trump's chart. So I've actually talked about this time. I've been talking about this, I don't know, since beginning of spring, towards the end of winter, and just looking at this Mars transit. And it can do one of two things with Trump. Because, of course, we're dealing with Gemini. One, it could signal his return, or it could signal his end, or both, because we're dealing with Gemini. But he is going to be a player here, right? He's going to be a player with this Mars. And let's say, for instance, you're a let's say you're a white hat person. I am not a white hat person, but let's say you are. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw things during this period, and really starting in October, if you didn't see, white hat things like kind of vindicate what's going on in your life, right? Or your relationship with Trump, being somebody who is Joe Biden being unduly elected, right? Like, could you see things happening with election results? Could things pop up? Could you start to see like the hands of theoretical like destiny moving Trump forward here with this Mars transit? I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility, actually. But you have to be careful with the retrograde too, because in as much as you could see something here that might look like, and again, I am not banging the drum for this. I'm just looking at it. And even the Mars transit with Uranus in his chart, it's explosive, right? Now, the unfortunate thing is how much they have managed to link Trump to quote unquote patriots or Christians or Americans or whatever. That Mars transit, because people have become so identified with a particular movement or somebody that on some level they're loyal to, that Mars transit on his Uranus could also be beyond Trump. Like it could be something fractious and aggressive as it relates to like Trump supporters or Trump Nation or TDS, all those things, right? That could happen because he is a wild card. He's always been a wild card. That's who Trump is. He's the joker in the deck. And you never know. You to this day, you still cannot get a handle on it. You can get a handle on one side, and then you can get a handle. I mean, I was online today, and I was looking at a debate, and somebody listed, well, if Trump is controlled opposition, then why did he have to go through all this shit and all these impeachments and constant harassment and having his name dragged through the mud and all these other things? If he was controlled opposition, why would he have to go through that? And then somebody would come in with an equally clear, rational argument as to why. So we'll never figure it. I'm just telling you, we will never figure it out. It's the nature of his chart. So we're going to see some of this happen, though. And next year, when Uranus conjuncts midheaven, that's a whole other story. That is a whole other story in Trump land. So should he run again? I think he should have run earlier. I think he should have run in 2000. I think he should have challenged Al Gore. But again, that's when you're playing election fantasy football. If you're playing election fantasy football, that's in my estimation, that was the time. Because the astrology was there for him. Clearly, the astrology was there for him. He would have gotten an 8-year run. And then Saturn going into his 12th house, could have reinvented himself, comes out the other side. Saturn on the ascendant, right? Whoever fucked up after him, he could come back in and clean it up from a different perspective. All right, all eyes on Trump, because that's where Mars is headed. And if you thought that the TDS was frothy, just wait. Just wait till Mars kicks in and starts hitting that Uranus. All right, thanks for being here, everybody. Appreciate you. Jasper has made 3 appearances tonight. His initial appearance, he took time out to create a cat hair farm in my suit. And he came back again to check in with you. And then he's back here to say goodnight. So from me and the Astrological Cat, we thank you. We thank you for being here. Catch me on 15 Minutes of Flame. 15 Minutes of Flame. That's ovflame.com. And that'll be on Tuesday morning, 9/11 Central Standard Time. Do that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I come back with the Friday Forecast. We'll have Russ Winter live from Prague on Friday, and we'll check in with him, see what's going on in Russ Winterland. Always a great time and a great chat to hang out with Russ. And then for a lot of you, I'll be seeing you in October. In the meantime, use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to set what's possible. Hit me up if you'd like a reading. Check out my Astrological course if you'd like to sign up for that. That's a 16-hour download. Should probably get it before I raise my prices. My consultant says I charge too less.